Hey everyone, welcome to Normal America Show. Host Rob Knorr, Friday morning call-in show. We're going to try to start making this a regular thing. Happy to be here today. I got to be honest, other than doing debates and stuff, I would rather do all of my shows this early in the morning because I think a lot of times you're getting new news and new political stuff. It's coming out usually early in the morning, so it's nice to be sort of the first person to comment on it as opposed to everyone commenting all day and then me streaming late. So it's nice for those reasons. Also, I don't know, I feel it gives me a reason to get up and be all chipper. I got up, left the dogs out, played with them in the yard for 15 minutes or so. I feel so much better than last night. Just feel tremendous. So I'm off today. Feels nice. I do have a couple trainings to do, but I could do them on my computer. And then, of course, this evening, my wife's sister and her boyfriend, who I'm good friends with both of them, they're coming over this evening, and we're going to watch the Mike Tyson-Logan Paul fight, which I think will be fun. We could talk about that if people want to call in. I believe the plan is we're making little appetizers. I think my wife's going to make dip. My son, Hank, and me, we have agreed that we will make cookies. So we're going to go out and get ingredients for cookies. He really likes no-bake cookies, so we'll probably end up making those. And then I believe we're having meatball subs. So I'm excited. As a fat guy, all good for me. So I'm really excited for tonight, though. And then, unfortunately, I go back to work tomorrow. Like I said, it's going to be work heavy. But I am going to get those shorts out every day. We're getting that. Yesterday was a little uniquely different because I literally was on the road at 7 a.m. and I didn't get back until I was streaming. I guess I could have did a short after my stream last night, but I was dead tired. So I don't know if it came across, but I was very tired last night. Someone linked an article that we went through, and it was fun to go through it. That kept me awake a little, but what time should you get here for meatball subs and cookies? 7 p.m. Now I am, believe it or not, as the channel grows here a little, we still don't have a huge community, but what I would like to do is offer, once it gets nice out, spring or summer, we're going to try to have some sort of get-together. I don't know how many people could stay. Hey, thanks for the sub, Captain Nebulous. I don't know how many people could stay at my house, but if we had like sort of a party or whatever, there's enough cheap hotels around here. You'd probably be paying like $80-$90 a night to stay in a hotel. And we could get a block of them or whatever. You know, even if it would just be 5-10 people, I think it'd be fun to have a real life get together. Oh, Dylan's upset. Oh no! That's what the show last night was about. I don't care what Democrats like that think. The ones that had no problems with the terrible appointments under Biden and the weaponization of all of these agencies, I don't care that they're upset that it'll be used against them now. I don't care at all. I'd listen to someone like Sparky if he has a criticism, or I would listen to someone like my Democrat friends that were like, geez, I have a problem with the lawfare that's been used against Trump. Them I'll listen to, but I won't listen to the people that are streamers that had no problem with those sort of things. So there you go, Sparky'd come out. That'd be a 2-for-1 if you got to meet Sparky and me at the same time. My goodness. That's like meeting NSYNC and the Backstreet Boys all at the same time. Is that a good comparison? Sparky and me to NSYNC and the Backstreet Boys? Let's be honest, though. I'm definitely Timberlake in that crew. There's, let's be clear. Sparky ain't no Timberlake. I hear you, Sparky. Let's see what's up with that. So we'll give people a chance to get ready. There's the link to the Discord, anyone who wants to call in. Now, here's the deal. Usually the earliest people that call in get the bulk of the time because the way it works out is if I'm doing a 2-hour show here of call-ins and only one person enters the lobby and I talk to them for 20-25 minutes, and then all of a sudden 6 people enter, those 6 people I'm only going to be able to talk to for like 5-10 minutes apiece. So we have a hard cutoff time at 11 a.m. because, as I said, I'm going with my son to purchase cookies or ingredients for cookies. He's very excited. Yeah, thank you. Hit the like button. Also, I'm excited that he's getting to the age where, like, oh, people are coming over. He wants to do something for the people. So he wants to make cookies for everyone. I think that's pretty cool. So there's the link. Before we get going, if no one wants to call in yet, I do have things I could talk about myself. Here's a great story that I think you all will appreciate. Maybe this is something someone would like to talk about. I want to talk about it. This is from October 16th, 2024. This was just published, though. To Chris Wray from Barry Loudermilk, chairman on the Subcommittee of Oversight. I write to you in my capacity of chairman of the Committee on the House Administration Subcommittee on Oversight, which has jurisdiction over the safety and security of the United States Capitol. I respectfully request that the FBI respond in writing to the following questions pursuant to the subcommittee's oversight responsibilities over the security of the U.S. Capitol complex. Your written responses to the following questions will assist the subcommittee in conducting a review of the events on January 5th and January 6th, 2021, in conducting appropriate oversight of the investigation of those days, and in ensuring the safety and security of the United States Capitol complex. In June 2023, during a transcribed interview with the House Committee on Judiciary, Mr. Stephen D'Antonio, former assistant director in charge of the FBI's Washington field office, brief pause here, these are my words, not them, also the guy that was in charge of the Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping hoax. Oh, and Vortome, thanks so much for the super chat for $10. Department of Government Efficiency will basically be an auditing department. It'll be good to see, especially at the Pentagon. But what recourse will Americans have for the misuse of assets? Probably not much recourse, because it would have been legal other than firing these people. But at least we could stop the bleeding. Continuing here. Steve D'Antoni testified that the FBI received, quote, corrupted data from one of the major cell carriers related to the FBI's investigation into the individual who planted two explosives near the DNC and Republican National Committee on the night of January 5th, 2021. Mr. D'Antonio also suggested the corrupted data may have contained the identity of the suspect. He testified, "We did a complete geofence. We have complete data. Not complete, because there's some data that was corrupted by one of the providers. Not purposely by them, right? It's just unusual circumstances that we have corrupt data from one of the providers. I'm not sure. I can't remember now which one. But for that day, which is awful because we don't have that information to search. So it could have been that provider. Yeah, with our luck, with the investigation, it probably was, right?" Woo! Our FBI, ladies and gentlemen. We'll keep going here, and then I'll give my thoughts. Continuing with Loudermilk. As you may know, the subcommittee is conducting an investigation into the events of January 5th and January 6th, 2021. The subcommittee is not asking the FBI to comment on any specific suspect or the means, methods, or sources of the FBI's investigation. Rather, the subcommittee requires the FBI provide a response to Mr. D'Antonio's claim that the FBI received corrupted data. Your written responses to the following questions will assist the subcommittee in conducting a review of the events of those days and in ensuring the safety and security of the United States complex. I therefore ask you to respond to writing the following questions. 1. Did the FBI receive corrupted or otherwise unusable cellular data returns from one or more of the cell carriers in connection with the investigation into the individual who planted two explosive devices at the RNC and DNC on January 5th? If so, which carriers provided the corrupted data to the FBI? If so, how was the cellular data transferred to the FBI? Dropbox, hard drive, etc. If so, was any third party involved with the transmitting of that data? Second, if the FBI received corrupted data or otherwise unusable cellular data returns, did the FBI inform the cell carriers that provided corrupted data that the data they provided was corrupted or otherwise unusable? If so, did the FBI make any attempt to obtain an uncorrupted or otherwise usable version of the data? Please describe in writing the efforts made to retrieve an uncorrupted version of the data. Please respond by October 30th. Now, from Zero Hedge, the article. Last year, the FBI official who oversaw the initial investigation who planted the pipe bombs told Congress cell phone data probe was corrupted. We have complete data. We already read that. It turns out D'Antonio, who oversaw the Gretchen Whitmer kidnap case before being transferred to D.C., may have perjured himself. The House Oversight Committee said Thursday it's found no evidence to support the claims from D'Antonio, who is now retired. Chairman Loudermilk has learned that no cell carrier provided corrupted data to the FBI in connection with the pipe bomb investigation, despite claims, the subcommittee said on X. Loudermilk provided more details about his finding. In June 2023, the former assistant director in charge of the FBI's Washington field office, D'Antonio, who oversaw the pipe bomb investigation, said that the FBI received corrupted data from one of the cell carriers that it most likely contained the identity of the pipe bomber. Given the significance of this information, my subcommittee sent letters to 3 major cell carriers, asking them to respond to Mr. D'Antonio's claim of corrupted data. Every major cell carrier responded that and confirmed they did not provide the FBI corrupted data. Additionally, every major cell carrier confirmed that they were never notified that the FBI had any issues accessing the data. This is contradictory to testimony, raises some serious questions about the status of the investigation into the pipe bomber and why the case remains unsolved nearly 4 years later. Now, I want you to think about this for a minute. Why is my voice quiet? Am I quiet this morning? I don't know. The docile tones of Rob Knorr in the morning? I don't know. Make sure I didn't miss any super chats. Yeah, every Friday is going to be a call-in morning show. So let's be clear is what's going on here. I said from the outset of the January 6th committee that it was a farce, that it was a show, that it was designed to just attack Trump and his supporters politically. We already had the FBI investigating January 6th, so why did we need this committee that was going to be produced by a television producer, that was going to be on prime time? Because it was all a show trial. It was all designed to influence the American people. That's what was going on. We know that there's significant problems. Just recently we learned that, what was the name of the woman that testified that Trump grabbed the wheel of the beast and tried to take it back to lead the revolution. And it was all bullshit. They hid sort of the answers to the people that responded to that. It was like, no, that didn't happen. Then it turns out that woman was connected with Kathy Hutchinson. She was connected with Liz Cheney without her lawyer there, which has ethical violations with that. But what I said was, actually, there were questions about January 6th that I wouldn't mind seeing a committee answer. 1, how many agencies had people that were on the ground there that day? Why do we still not have answers to when we have the guy who was the person who was tasked with defending the Capitol, Capitol Chief Sund? Why, when he says how much of a failure this was, that he was denied access to the National Guard before January 6th, that he was denied during January 6th, that he has phone records that show that he kept requesting and was denied, and yet the person that's Sergeant at Arms that kept denying him claims that nope, he never denied them. Someone's lying. That's direct contradictory testimony under oath. Why do we have no answers to this? Those sorts of questions, why was there a failure in sharing of intelligence? Those questions deserve to be answered. If it's not just about going after Trump and one political party, these are the sorts of questions that we need answers. No answer. And then, of course, the most serious thing that occurred January 6th, other than the death of Ashley Babbitt, the most serious thing that occurred was the planting of pipe bombs. Let me mince no words about this. Whoever planted those pipe bombs deserves to be held to the full account of the law. And I'm talking decades in prison. I don't give a shit if that's a Trump supporter, if it's a Trump hater, if it's an Antifa member, if it's a congressman, if it was someone from Trump's team. I don't care. That is deadly serious. Deadly serious. That's no joke. A crowd turning into a riot outside the Capitol, there's serious nature in that. But given what we saw leading up to that with the riots that occurred all summer, it wasn't really that unusual. The people that engaged in violence deserve to be held accountable. But it's clearly being blown out of proportion. But what's not being blown out of proportion and what makes January 6th unique is those pipe bombs. That's different. We didn't see that. And I'm dead serious here. This is for my Democrat friends that might be watching. To me, that's one of the key differences for why January 6th was more serious than most of the average left-wing riots that we saw leading up to that. Now, in totality, the left-wing riots were worse because the magnitude of how much property was damaged, how many people were hurt, how many times it happened was much worse. But as far as specific events, pipe bombs being planted near our Congress people is serious. It's very serious. And it deserves investigated, and we deserve to have answers. Why don't we have any? Why not? Now, I've covered this several times. Revolver News has been great on this. We have the visual clips where we could see that the Secret Service is planted right next to the pipe bomb. An off-duty police officer walks up to them, casually talks to them, apparently tells them about the pipe bomb. They continue, despite the fact that they think there's a bomb under the bench, apparently, to allow civilians to walk right by it, just taking their time. And then, of course, what I thought was one of the most damning revelations was Benny Thompson, who was the head of the January 6th committee. He testifies in front of Congress, and Thomas Massie starts asking him questions about the pipe bomb, about this video, that aforementioned video I just talked about, and a bunch of other questions. That's public knowledge. Benny Thompson, the head of the January 6th committee, knew absolutely nothing about the pipe bomb. Oh, I don't know. Now, they could tell you specific details of Kathy Hutchinson saying that Trump said to turn the beast around and all of this bullshit. But the guy who was in charge of the January 6th investigation is like, oh, really, I don't recall much about the pipe bomb. How's that possible? When it was clearly the most serious thing that occurred that day. And then we have all of the people that they found from January 6th, just from little pictures, from using cell phone carrier data. All these pictures that are put on social media, they're arresting blue-haired grandmas that didn't do anything violent. Still, to this day, 4 years later, they're charging people that were at the Capitol on January 6th. And yet we have a picture of the pipe bomber holding a cell phone, and they're like, nothing we could do about that. We have no clue. So, when asked about it, the agent in charge, Steve D'Antona, who I again remind you, was the agent in charge of the Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping, where they entrapped a bunch of people and created this plot to kidnap Whitmer. But the FBI would never do that, right? They would never have people, they wouldn't fake plan a bomb. They wouldn't have people in the crowd to agitate people and stir up violence. They wouldn't do that. Oh, but the agent in charge did do that with the Gretchen Whitmer case just months prior. Anyways, he's like, because people were asking, like, okay, well, we have a picture at least. Do we have more pictures? Were there more cameras on the road? This person who planted the pipe bomb is literally walking down the street. How many of these buildings have cameras? You only have this one picture? And by the way, they're holding a cell phone. If you know the time and the place that this picture was taken and you have them holding a cell phone, then surely can't you use geofencing to get a good idea? And the agent goes, oh, yeah, we tried that, but unfortunately, you're not going to believe this. You're not going to believe this, but the carrier that, he was probably on with that cell phone, unfortunately, they sent us corrupted data. So what can we do? I know it sounds silly. Knowing our luck, right? That's what Steve D'Antona says. Turns out that was a lie. Looks like that was a lie. Cell phone carrier said, no, we never sent corrupted data. Whoops. Now, I'm calling on a new January 6th committee. Let's do it. And this time, let's answer those two questions. Why was security inadequate? Why was there a failure of intelligence? Why was there lies between people to Stephen's son when he asked to deploy the National Guard? How many Fed agents were involved in the crowd? And what's going on with the pipe bomber? Surely, all of the people, the Democrats, all of the streamers that I've debated that are so serious about January 6th, in fact, that's the majority of what they talked about going into the 2024 election, surely they'll join me in calling for answers to these questions. Right? Because January 6th was such a dark day, we need to get to the bottom of this, right? And I mean this from the bottom of my heart. If the end result is it leads to some Trump supporter being arrested, so be it. We have a right as the American people to know this event that's been told to us, and some people said it's the worst event since Pearl Harbor that occurred in our country. Well, the most significant, dangerous thing that occurred that day, we have the right to get to the bottom of it. Right? So I assume all of my Democrat friends will be speaking up saying, of course, yes. Also, I'm sick and tired of any time they want to entrap Trump and investigate him and his associates for any sorts of crimes, they end up nailing them for misleading statements or saying things that are untruthful to investigators. And yet, when we see a litany of times that happens from people that are outside of Trump's scope, they get away with it scot-free. If it's true that Steve D'Antonio perjured himself, he needs to go to jail. Period. He should not be above the law just because he was an FBI agent. To the contrary, he should be more accountable to it. And until people go to jail for these sorts of things, it will continue in perpetuity. All right, we got some call-in guests. Woo! All right, I didn't see the order that people called in, so we're just going to go in the order that I see people. So let's start with Cloak of Shadow. Can you hear me, Cloak of Shadow? I'll post that link again if anyone else.
Yeah, I can hear you. I was listening to it. I didn't think I was going to come on up.
Look at that. I was pretty abrupt. I had go ahead.
So yeah, I mean, I echo a lot of the points that you've said so far. I mean, a lot of there's a lot of questions that need to be answered from both, the FBI when it comes to the DOJ, what they've been doing with January 6th. Didn't prep anything for my question for that portion,
okay.
but we can discuss that if you want to. The other portion that I wanted to ask was regarding, I don't know if you called me. We talked last week about the media's, what the media has basically done, how they've, spun up people to the point where they, they think that, Donald Trump's the new Hitler, right?
Right.
Had a couple of follow-up questions when it comes to it. Main is a premise question. Do you think that the media was actually objective? Like, say, they were level-headed. They said things, just the facts, who, what, when, and where. They didn't go into, why, or they didn't, throw spins on it. Do you think that we would see as much violence today if the media told things straight?
Probably. Well, it depends. No, I would say no is the truthful answer.
Okay.
But it depends on what you mean by violence, right? Like, I don't know that would have an effect on, inner city gang violence. But talking sort of violence that occurs...
Political violence, if that's the case. Like assassination attempts.
Yeah. No, I don't... Well, okay. I'll get a little conspiratorial for a minute. Assassination attempts may be occurring regardless, right? Because... we may find out that they had connections to things outside of just normal people. So maybe they had connections to intel agencies or agencies from other countries, etc. So you would likely see that stuff. You know what I mean? If the assassination attempt is someone who's sitting there watching MSNBC and it's just like, oh shit, I'm getting so pissed, then yeah, you would be able to say if that's what we find out. Maybe that wouldn't have occurred if MSNBC had a more measured sort of tone when referring to Trump. But if not, if it's like the second assassination attempt, seems like some dude who, was connected to trying to have people volunteer in Ukraine and get weapons to Ukraine and had connections to sort of international agencies. I don't know that guy's hatred comes from watching MSNBC. That guy might be someone who has those beliefs beyond whether or not he's watching that stuff. But in general, I think you're right. There is a gray area here, though, because I try my best not to blame people for stochastic terrorism because I don't want blame for that myself. For example, I just gave a spiel on Steve D'Antonio and what I see as possible corruption at the FBI. If some lunatic that's watching me decides, well, I'm going to go punch an FBI agent, should I be blamed for that? I would say no, because I think that I'm saying truthful information of things that I really believe, and so I shouldn't be blamed. If you truly believe, if you're Rachel Maddow and you truly believe that Trump's a fascist, you should be allowed to say that. I think that you have an ethical responsibility, particularly the more influential you get, and if you're on sort of cable television or network television, you have an ethical responsibility to tell your audience how they should or shouldn't act, that you're not calling for violence, that you think, and I don't think that the media does a good job of that either. But yeah, I mean, the fact where you get into difficulties where they're knowingly lying or knowingly spreading hoaxes. So
Well, I wouldn't even say it's necessarily knowingly lying. I wouldn't say it even goes that far for it. Even if like say they truly do believe it, though, say that that's what they believe with it. The thing is, like, I always equate it this way: if you have someone who's a crack addict, you don't say, "Oh, this person totally has crack." I don't know if they necessarily have crack, but they definitely have crack. You don't give them the impetus to say, "Hey, I need to go over there, try and get some crack," or, "Hey, look, this guy's actually Hitler. I need to stop the new Hitler. We know what Hitler did beforehand. I need to stop it." Like,
well, again,
it's to the point where it gets so spun up where, like,
but you have to be careful.
there's got to be something. Yeah.
You have to be careful because then the logical extension of what you're saying is then we couldn't have any punditry. It would literally just be someone in front of the camera and it would just be like, this is the evidence we found today. This was the statement that was found today. And you wouldn't be able to say. So, for example, if I was on Fox News, 95% of what I talk about wouldn't be allowed then. Because I'll say, Steve D'Antona did this. This is what we know. We see this large sort of scale FBI that have gone after Trump this whole time. And like, did they have agents in the crowd? People would say, you don't have proof of that. You don't have proof they had agents in the crowd. You can't say that. Someone may go out and take a heinous action. And so I would be careful to say that people aren't allowed to give their opinions. Now, again, it's different because I'm not on cable news. I'm admitting that, that I'm looking into things, right? Like, so I don't have proof, I guess what I'm saying, I'm fully admitting it, that the FBI planted pipe bombs or anything like that. I'm talking about the discrepancies they have. That's different than a lot of times what we see at the mainstream media where they'll say, Trump said Nazis were good people. And they didn't. They're making an affirmative claim that's just bullshit, which we could see. So I'm not doing that sort of stuff. And the other thing is I'm directly telling people, like, never engage in violence, don't do this, keep a cool head, and that's not occurring with the mainstream media. Now, what happens is, though, like, I think that the solution to this is that you just have to be, if you're a Republican or if you're connected to Trump, you just have to totally freeze those people out. Like, Trump's team should be, whoever his press secretary ends up being, I would be like, yeah, we're not giving credentials to anyone from any of the major news networks. Fuck you. No, MSNBC doesn't get a seat at the table. No, CNN doesn't. No, the New York Times doesn't. Sorry. We'll bring in people that have questions that will be hostile to us, but we'll make them from podcasters. We'll make them from people that are streamers online. We'll make them from local newspapers. But no.
But do you think there's going to be an actual shift if that's the case? Do you think there's actually going to be a shift towards that if that's the case, or no?
What do you mean? A shift is to people getting their news more from those places?
Well, I mean, people are already getting their news from podcasts. I mean, I get more news from podcasts than I do from the regular news media. Like, I just get more news from that in general. Do you think that we're going to see that shift and transition, like, more abroad? Say, hey, are we not going to see, MSNBC, CNN, ESPN, all those, like, at the front table? They may be. Like,
no, I don't think Trump's team will do. I don't think Trump's team will do that. If they did do that, it would have a significant effect. But I don't think they will. But they should. And like, that's it. I think that's why you saw the LA Times and the Washington Post were like, we're not going to endorse, because I think they see the writing on the wall. I think they knew that Trump was probably in a good position to possibly win, and they were like, oh shit, we need to at least signal to him that sort of our newspapers that have been completely unfair to him for the past 8 years, that we're at least trying to turn a new leaf, because theoretically we could get frozen out. Now the problem is, there's going to be people inside the federal government that hate Trump, and they're going to leak and go to MSNBC, CNN, the New York Times, the Washington Post. That's where they'll be going. And so there'll still be a significant portion of people that are tuning into those news sources because they want to hear news critical of Donald Trump. But it's a never-ending source of frustration for me where Trump's teams continues, and Republicans in general, continue to get treated like crap over and over and over by these outlets, and yet you turn on Meet the Press on the weekend, there's Marco Rubio. There's another Republican. Every time. Just saying, no, we're not doing it. We'll do podcasts. I think that what should happen should be that they should set up a list of prominent podcasters and say, we'll do one of these a month to talk directly to the American people. I also think that they should be doing like the old fireside chat thing, which
that's what I was saying. They did that previously, the fireside chats. Yeah.
You see that Vivek and Musk have said that they're going to do that. They're going to have a weekly show where they talk about their agency, Doge, of government efficiency. They're going to talk about, here's waste that we found, and tell the American people directly to them. I think that's a brilliant idea. But, for me, I do think that the mainstream media, it's like any of these institutions. Like, the media has destroyed their credibility. It's one of the most positive things about the 2016 election of Trump, that normie people saw how corrupt the mainstream media was. And not only that, but a lot of other institutions, like our entertainment industry. Any thought that maybe these people in Hollywood are intelligent people with serious political points ought to be right out the window at this point. Right? Like, for any normal person, does anyone give a shit what Beyonce thinks at this point? Does anyone care what Taylor Swift thinks? Haven't we proven that, like, they're just whatever? They're just saying what they're saying to go along, to get along. And so for me, you know, I'm happy to see the declined credibility in the mainstream media, but they still have power because they still control the narrative in what we're talking about. And so, like,
right, but why is it they still control the narrative then? If that's the case, it's just because they've been entrenched that long. It's just going to take a while, like kind of like a rat infestation. It takes a while to get the rats all out, or
well,
is it just
it's people's fault like mine? That's why they still do. Because where am I mean, seriously though, where am I going to find what to talk about today? Right? And so, let's say we're going into the election, and there's a rally at Madison Square Garden, right? And Tony Hinchcliffe tells a joke about Puerto Ricans. What am I talking about the next day on my show? Well, I'm talking about Tony Hinchcliffe. You want to know why? Because the Democrats and the media went insane and said this proves that he's racist against Puerto Ricans. And then everyone that's in my audience is like, Rob, what do you think about the bullshit media making this a narrative? So then I talk about the bullshit media. Therefore, they controlled what I talked about that day. De facto, that's what happened. Or they say Trump said Nazis were good people. It's bullshit, but it's on everyone's mind, and so that's what everyone's talking about. So when I come on to do my show that day, what am I talking about? They said Trump did not say Nazis were good people. Or Trump said to drink bleach. Or Pete Hegseth, he's not qualified. Is he a white supremacist? That's what we end up talking. RFK is going to be a complete insane lunatic. What am I talking about, right? Constantly, and even on the streaming spaces, that's what happens. So I used to complain about this all the time. I would do all these panel shows, right? And we would go back. I remember going back to like 2021. We're doing these panel shows. Hey, thanks so much for the follow. I appreciate it, Miss Katonic. Oh, Miss Katonic. Call of Cthulhu fan? Maybe my guess. Anyways, we would look into like all these stories that were occurring, like, Gavin Newsom went to the French Laundry while there were lockdowns and shit. Great, let's talk about this when we do one of these panel shows, right? No. For a week and a half, every panel show I did, you know what the major topic was? Ted Cruz went to Cancun. He went to Cancun. Yeah. And I just like, I guess
during the hurricane. Yeah.
I was like, I guess that's shitty, but that's so far, like, a politician going on vacation while bad shit occurs. Yeah, I guess that's bad. But that's nowhere near as bad as if, say, Ted Cruz said, hey, all of you are locked down in your homes. Oh, but I'm going to violate those lockdowns. That would be a far worse story. Oh, and by the way, we see that happening with Democratic governors all over the country, right? So we're going to talk about that? Nah, we're not going to talk about that. Or an even better example is all of the times I wanted to talk about Russiagate once we started to have evidence how corrupt it was and that the FBI legally spied on Trump's team. No one ever wanted to talk about that with me. And in fact, one panel I was on, they goaded me in. They said, we're going to have 3 topics, and the first one's going to be Russiagate. Fine. 2 hours before the show, they sent a notice out to all of us in the Discord chat that are doing the panel. And it turns out most people don't want to do that. We're going to do abortion instead. That's constantly where I was going. That's why I actually respect someone like Andrew Wilson, who was like, screw that, I'm going to build a network up from the bottom up. And so he built the Crucible. Part of it was because we're tired of having to rely on these left-wingers to gatekeep not only who could come on, but what the topics are when you come on. And you can see time after time when I would go on these shows, they'd be like, what aboutism? We don't want to talk about the stuff you want to talk about. We just want to talk about stories about Trump being an evil Hitlerian, douchebag. That's it. That's what the topic is. And so we have to find a way out of that. And part of it is, at the top level, you say, we're not going to give access to these agencies. We're not going to pay attention to them. Screw them. But that also means that as consumers of media, I think we need to do a better job of not relying on what those people say to say. And you can see the mistake that's made constantly. How many times will you see people, even like me, I'm not taking myself out of this. I suck at this too. You'll point someone out like Bill Maher. Oh, look what Bill Maher even agrees with me. Fuck Bill Maher. How about that? How about why do I care what this shitlib thinks? How about that? Why am I still relying on him for some sort of credibility? And that's the problem. Like, we're so entrenched in the old ways of media that all of us still, the ones even that hate them, still look at it and say, oh, look what's going on. Scott Jennings kicking ass on CNN. He is. It's fun to watch. But what are we talking about? Whatever they talked about on CNN. I mean, so it's a fine line. I'm not saying that it's always bad to talk about that stuff. I'm not. But there needs to be a reckoning where it's like, these people aren't journalists. For me, a report from the New York Times is no different than a claim that Destiny makes. I just don't give a shit. If Destiny's out there going, whoa, Trump's evil, he's Hitler, and the New York Times is like, here's our report that Trump's evil and he's Hitler, anonymous sources have said, fuck them both.
Yeah.
That's
anonymous source close to, or who understands the president's thinking. It's ridiculous.
Yep. So, all right, man. Well, hey, thanks for the call. We're gonna get to the next caller. I appreciate it again, though.
No, I appreciate you. I need to get to work anyways. Take care of yourself.
All right, take care.
Thanks.
All right, next we have Black Jaden, who we've talked to before as well. Jaden, can you hear me? Check. Jaden, you there? I'm doing great, Alesto.
What's up, Rob?
How you doing today?
Good. How are you?
Good. Feeling pumped up in the morning. I was a little tired last night. Had a good night's sleep, so I'm ready to go.
Good. Well, I just have a couple questions for you. I guess
Sure.
I'll start out with my first one. Let's see. Do you think any of Trump's appointees will put up roadblocks for his agenda, specifically Marco Rubio?
Maybe. I don't know. It's a 50-50 toss-up. So I'll say this. In general, the agenda that Trump set forth and the people that he's appointed, I'm very pleased with. I'm more optimistic with them than I expected that I would be. That's in totality. I also know that it's just reality that he was going to appoint people that I didn't like. Marco Rubio would be one of them. Stefanik would be another that I would put in that category of people that I wouldn't want touching sort of our foreign policy in any way. Now, will Rubio then go out of his way like a John Bolton to sabotage Trump's agenda? Well, 2 points on that. One, what is Trump's agenda? I falsely think that Trump thinks what I think on foreign policy. I don't know that that's true. Maybe Trump does think we want to continue to give Israel money. Maybe Trump does think we want to continue to give Ukraine money. So in that sense, would Marco Rubio be sabotaging him if he was doing things like that, even though it's things that I would disagree with? No. Maybe that's why Trump picked them. Or maybe Trump picked them because he wanted someone that was hawkish, like he said about John Bolton, so that it would sort of be fearful to our hostile enemies. Listen, we still have people here that are willing to go to war, and so we want these sorts of people here. That could be why it was there. A point that I saw someone make that I think is actually brilliant is when you see the appointments that Trump made, it actually was a coalition type of appointment. So when you think of who it was that Trump got him on board to vote for him, you had MAGA people. Well, MAGA people are getting what they want with like Musk and Vivek and people like that. Then you had people that were maybe not necessarily MAGA, but that were heavily concerned about the border. You got Tom Homan. Then you have like establishment Republican people, and you get Stefanik and Rubio. Then you had like the sort of progressive people that were fed up. You get RFK. So it does look like a coalition, and I guess you do have to say there were establishment-like Republican people that voted for Trump, and they're going to feel like they want some sort of seat at the table, so maybe Rubio's a gift to them. I'll say this specifically about Rubio. I think that he was terrible in calling for funding to go to Ukraine over and over again. However, I do believe the last round of funding that was voted on to send to Ukraine, he was against, which is a positive sign. Maybe he thinks enough is enough at this point. I don't know. So ultimately, I guess it comes down to what is Trump's agenda, and if Rubio is antithetical to what Trump really wants, will there be enough good people surrounding Trump this time that will be able to stop one agent or one agency sabotaging him? I hope so. But we'll have to see. I don't like the appointment at all, if I'm honest, though.
Now, can he fire these people
Yeah.
that he's appointing?
Yeah, I think that he's allowed to remove anyone that he wants. I do believe. I don't think there's a problem with that. So he theoretically could. Like, they got rid of Jeff Sessions. They got rid of other people, so I think he would be allowed to do that. So we'll see what happens there, but I don't know. Like, again, I'm not. It's difficult for me because I'm of two minds of this. I think the people that are looking, screw the Democrats that were okay with the lawfare against Trump, and I don't give a shit about them. But the people particularly that are Trump supporters have every right to look at these appointments, each one of them, and say, I like this, I don't like this. And now is a good time to say, this is what we need to be worried about. But then I also see it going way overboard. It's like Trump could have appointed, like some of these Trump supporters, you could have been like, okay, to all of the cabinet positions, give me your list of exactly who you could want. And Trump could have done all of them except one, and these people would be like, fuck, this sucks, Trump's selling out, oh my God, it's going to be terrible. It's like, I'm not going to get that heated about it now. No, it may come back to bite us in the ass. It absolutely could. But for now, I'm like, Trump's campaign ran quite smoothly. They won. I didn't think they would win. They faced an incredible uphill battle, and they were talented enough that they won. He set an agenda where the things that I claimed that I wanted most, rooting out corruption at places like the FBI, at least he's talking about it. He seems to try to be appointing people that would be likely to do something like that. So I'm not going to freak out because he appointed Marco Rubio. That's how I'm looking at it.
Yeah, I don't think one person on his cabinet could really make that big of a difference.
It could. It certainly could. It's just, at this point, I mean, the other thing to remember is, I mean, we're in November 15th. The election was last Tuesday. And, like, so we're already delved into this stuff. Like, take a breath. Like, things are going remarkably positive directionally. He won. Like, a lot of the agenda he's setting, I think, is what most MAGA people want. A lot of the appointments are what most MAGA people would want. So maybe, just maybe, Trump knows something that I don't this time. So again, as soon as first time that Trump's like, yeah, talk to Marco Rubio and we're going to bomb the shit out of Iraq, I'm going to be like, what is this shit? No, right? That's what I'll do. I'll criticize it, but I'm not going to jump the gun on it right now, as far as I'm concerned.
So which are your favorite Trump appointees so far, and which people, if any, that are in the Congress or Senate that you would like for him to appoint for certain positions?
Well, I think Homan in charge of the security, given that he seems like he's been beating the drum on this for years, I think that's probably the best pick as far as someone who will skillfully achieve what needs to be done. Also, Homan signifies to me that he's not going to listen to crocodile tears, because you have to understand, once we start deporting people, that will be the mainstream media story. Here's Johnny Smith and his dad was deported, and oh my God, look at how he's bawling. So you need someone there that's going to be like, tough shit, then we'll deport the kid too. So good deal there for Homan. I think RFK is a great appointment for two reasons. One, that I think that he shouldn't have stabbed RFK in the back. Probably RFK is a significant reason that Trump won. I think him coming on board with Trump's team as sort of someone who comes from more of a traditional left-wing perspective, but also is distrusting of our institutions, I think that that's a good pick in that sense, that it was fair. And I also think that that's the best chance that we'll see accountability for COVID. So I think that is a tremendous pick. And I'm very happy with RFK being there. I like the Matt Gaetz pick. Now, I think you could have picked someone better, like Ken Paxton, who's the AG out of Texas. That would have probably been someone that I would have been looking at for AG. But with the Gaetz, the reason that I like the Gaetz pick, it's not because of him personally. It's because he represents someone that's going to go in there and be pissed off with a chip on his shoulder and say, we're getting to the bottom of this shit. And that's exactly what needs to happen. Marcus Uno says, reasoning, loyalty, that's how MAGA operates. Yep, absolutely. Let me be quite clear. Marcus Uno, I would have accepted Donald Trump appointing people that had no fucking clue about any of these agencies that were loyal to him, rather than anyone who had any base knowledge that there was a question of loyalty. Yep, 100%. Yep, that's absolutely you nailed it, Marcus Uno. Wow, you're so smart. And you think that that's a negative? When we saw the first administration of Trump, he was constantly sabotaged by people within his own party and his own cabinet over and over and over. Constant leaks, constant working with agencies like the FBI to investigate him, including illegally spying on his team. over and over and over, to the point where his own generals lied to him when he tried to withdraw troops from Syria. Yep, so the number one criteria absolutely needs to be, I want people I could trust. Now, no one had a problem when Joe Biden did that, or when Barack Obama did that, when he had his wingman Eric Holder appointed to his AG. No one gave a shit that loyalty was the number one thing that he was looking for. So I don't give a fuck what someone like you says, Marcus Uno. Yep, absolutely 100%. Yep, that's what he should have, people loyal to him. He could have appointed Elon Musk or RFK to Attorney General, and you would say, what qualifications do they have to be Attorney General? Well, they're loyal. Good enough for me. Yep, that's better than what he did the first time, so absolutely fine with that. When you're going against such a powerful institution as these establishment institutions that are deep state, that are so corrupt that they've already showed that they'll be willing to break the law to go after you in any way, shape, or form, yep, you absolutely need people that are loyal to you. Great. Do we answer that question, Marcus Uno? Good deal. So, there are other, I don't have the list in front of me. That's just off the top of my head of the cabinet picks that I like. But yeah, those are some of the ones I like. I like anyone that seems like that they will go in there and they'll actually do something that's to hold accountable these institutions that were so damaging to us. We forget that the Biden administration demanded that every person at DOJ that Trump put in there resign when they came in within a month of it. I wanted to read this one thing. Hans Maschnick tweeted out, and I think this is absolutely spot on. If you didn't want Pete Hegseth as Secretary of Defense, you shouldn't have created a DEI military. If you didn't want Matt Gaetz to be Attorney General, you shouldn't have lied about Russia collusion. If you didn't want Tulsi Gabbard to be Director of National Intelligence, you shouldn't have written a fraudulent letter about Hunter Biden's laptop. If you didn't want Robert Kennedy to be Secretary of Health and Human Services, you shouldn't have covered up the origin of COVID. Yep, that's exactly the truth. That's what's going on. So... but anything else? We'll get to...
Yes, one last quick...
Sure.
I've seen a lot of stuff, and I haven't really done much research into it. All the allegations against Matt Gaetz when it comes to him, I guess, paying a minor for prostitution or stuff like that. I haven't done any research, but what's your take on that briefly? And how do people go find information about that? Because I've tried to search things about it, and it seems like a lot of it's tied up in sealed court cases, sealed documents.
Right. So I put absolutely zero stock into it. And here's why. How many times will people piss on my leg that I then have to continue to think it's raining as they piss on my leg again? I'm sorry. No, I don't care. I'll bring up an article here and I'll go through it. Molly Hemingway put an article up. I should have tagged this and I didn't, but I remember reading it. So let me see if I can find that from yesterday. But they accused Trump of colluding with Russia. They accused all of these. Elon Musk did this. Trump did this. It's always, these people did all these heinous sexual things. It comes from people that had no problem with Ashley Biden's diary showing her dad took inappropriate showers with her. And video confirmation that we could see over and over again, Joe Biden sniffing the hair of children. And people within the Democratic Party, several women saying that Joe Biden inappropriately touched them at certain points. And we could see that there was one woman, Tara Reid, that claimed that he actually sexually assaulted her in the most heinous ways possible. They didn't give a shit about any of that. So no, I don't give a shit that these people want to say, well, there are reports out there that Matt Gaetz slept with a 17-year-old hooker. Don't give a shit. If it turns out that it's true, that it happened, and there's definitive evidence that's brought forth, fine. I'm not going to say, oh, I demand an investigation into this, because the same people that were interested in covering up all of these accusations when it came to Democrats and have smeared bullshit reasons over and over again to go against Trump and all of his associates are again saying that about Matt Gaetz. Don't give a shit. Don't care at all. So I'll let you go here, but I will, if I can find this article, I will bring that up.
Thank you.
But all right, thanks so much. And before we get to the next
have a good day, Rob.
Yep, I'll try to bring that up. So just give me 1 second. Okay, there we go. I'm almost there. I know it. All right. I think this is the one I want. This is from Molly Hemingway in September 2022. The FBI's Matt Gaetz operation sidelined an effective Republican voice at a crucial time. That was the point. Gaetz was a highly effective member of Congress. Then all that changed with the publication of an anonymously sourced report accusing him of possibly being a child sex trafficker. Prior to March 2021, Gaetz was known for prominently pushing against Beltway groupthink. The colorful Florida congressman's been one of the few Republicans. Thank you, revolutions of you. Appreciate the follow. When Adam Schiff held secret hearings, selectively released information, and lied about coordination with the so-called whistleblower during the Ukraine impeachment hearings, Gaetz led a group of Republican congressmen in protest. The move, which enraged the corporate media and other partisans, helped unify Republicans in their eventual defeat of the impeachment stunt. Following January 6, Gaetz continued to defend concerns. Thanks so much, Edgier. Appreciate the follow. Gaetz did a lot of good. Then on March 30th, it all changed. An anonymously sourced report accusing him of possibly being a child sex trafficker. A group of New York Times reporters who won awards for the roles publishing the Russia collusion lie penned an anonymously sourced article with a devastating headline. Matt Gaetz is said to face a Justice Department inquiry over sex with an underage girl. The story was sourced to 3 people briefed on the matter, none of them identified in any way. The story contained no evidence against Gaetz of sex crimes, but much guilt by association. Later in the story, the pack of reporters admitted no charges had been filed. The extent of the criminal exposure is unclear, but the damage had been done. On Friday, 18 months after he was accused of being a pedophile and a child sex trafficker, the Washington Post published another anonymously sourced report. Career prosecutors recommend no charges for Matt Gaetz, said the article, published quietly on Friday. Not only was he never convicted of any of the crimes he was alleged to have committed, he wasn't even charged. And if you believe the anonymously sourced claims, he isn't going to be. The damage was already done. Matt Gaetz' days in politics are likely numbered, one CNN reporter claimed. Of course, even as the Washington Post admitted, Gaetz' position is shaky. The allegations are a sort that makes it very difficult for his colleagues to come to his defense. There's an obvious political risk to vocally defending someone who might face child sex trafficking charges, so expect his political allies to remain muted. That was the goal of the politicized leaks. Gaetz couldn't very well critique the Department of Justice for their political prosecutions if he was a pariah, even though that everyone thought was a P. On the year anniversary of the original Gaetz story, journalist Glenn Greenwald wrote that the leaks have the effect and often the intent of destroying someone's reputation, convicting them of repellent crimes in the court of public opinion that will never be brought into a court of law, thus relieving the state of the requirement to prove the crimes and depriving the accused of the opportunity to exonerate themselves. That's exactly what happened. He was the target of multiple Saturday Night Live skits. Gaetz is under investigation by the Justice Department for a number of crimes, including child sex trafficking and allegedly paying for sex. The Washington Post had in a video about the skits. Politico reporters suggested the walls were closing in, writing, Gaetz' allies are now in fear that Greenberg is preparing to strike a deal with prosecutors to deliver Gaetz. This was the tenor of coverage for months. The Associated Press tried to tie the Florida Governor Ron DeSantis to the scandal. If Gaetz is innocent of sex trafficking, why does he need an expensive criminal defense attorney from New York, said one left-wing attorney who is popular with corporate media. The Democrat-run Ethics Committee in the House typically waits to run investigation of members until after the DOJ finishes an investigation. In Gaetz' case, the committee went out of its way to begin to announce an investigation into the embattled member. Cheney, another obsessed Never Trump activist, delighted in the anonymously sourced allegations against Trump. They haven't yet apologized or publicly commented on Friday's anonymously sourced news. Former Vice President Mike Pence, Chief of Staff Mark Short, even accused Gaetz of being a child sex trafficker just this past July when he said Pence was a nice guy but that he would never be president. Quote, I don't know if Mike Pence will run for president in 2024, but I don't think Gaetz will have an impact on that. In fact, I'd be surprised if he's still voting. It's more likely he'll be in prison for child sex trafficking. So yeah, could Gaetz have possibly did this? Sure. I don't give a fuck. I care if he did it, but I don't care that people are accusing him and selectively. I don't give a shit about that. Show me the proof or shut your mouth. End of story. So that's how I feel on the Gaetz stuff. All right, Common Hope. Our friend from down under. What's happening, Common Hope?
Hey, how are you, Rob?
Doing good. How you doing this morning? Or what evening or whatever it is for you.
It's morning now, mate. It's almost 1 a.m.
Oh, there you go. Okay. How's it going?
Mate, well, actually, I'd like you to bring in Stripe Patches first, because I was having a chat to him in the waiting room, and he actually has some really interesting stuff to say about RFK, which is also my topic. So,
you want me to bring him in with you, or just?
No, just bring him in first. Drop me out. Bring him in. So,
all right, I'll do that. See you coming up. No problem. All right, Stripe Patches. What's happening?
Hello.
How's it going?
Yeah, I was talking to Common Hope about this. So, you know how before Biden dropped out and Kennedy dropped out, they were doing like 3-way polling for 3 candidates?
I do, yeah.
So just looking at, so the Hill has like an aggregate that they did that goes through August, which is as far as it goes, because then everything hit the fan for everybody in September.
Right.
So apparently, if you look at the polls here, and this is kind of what I think is interesting, how crucial Kennedy was. Kennedy was polling 5 points in Pennsylvania at the time. He was polling 5 points in Michigan, 5 in Wisconsin, 7 in Nevada, 6 in Arizona, and 5 in Georgia. And I just wonder, I don't understand. One of the questions that's interesting to me is why would it have been so bad to make any overtures to him for the DNC? I don't understand why they were so. Wouldn't it have been worth winning the election to have him be like the health czar?
Because when you have total control of power, you don't want someone who could illustrate how corrupt you were in wielding that power. RFK is at heart sort of a populist. It's the same thing as Bernie Sanders in 2016. Why didn't they make overtures to Bernie supporters? Why did they screw him over so significantly? Well, because they don't want someone from outside to actually have any position of authority where they would have any opportunity to look into what they're up to. That's why they hate Trump so much. That's why they hate RFK. And so RFK probably would have been quite vocal, like, look, if I get in there, I'm going to point out corruption on things like COVID. Oh boy, that doesn't work for the people that were intentionally either incompetent or intentionally corrupt in wielding power during the pandemic. That's not going to work for them, brother. So they're like, no, we're not going to appoint you. So they could have at least tried overtures and said, well, we're not going to appoint you, but we think you're an important voice and, maybe you'll have some unofficial capacity. Maybe they did that, maybe not. I don't know. But I think that they had a real hatred of RFK because it's not, if you look at the game as Republican versus Democrat, then yeah, your question makes absolute sense. It's like, well, wait a minute. If they knew that if RFK went to the other side, this would significantly harm them, or if he could be brought onto their side, it would significantly help. So you're trying to win that game, why not? But it's not. It's establishment versus people that are fighting against that establishment. And RFK is someone that's fighting against that establishment. So what are you going to offer him as a seat at the table? What are you going to say? Right? Like that would be like leaving, that would be like, arguably, it's like, imagine how ridiculous this would sound. Well, what if Trump would have just offered Hillary Clinton a seat at the table? What if he would have just offered her to be attorney general? Wouldn't that have brought on a lot of people that weren't really Kamala fans, but were traditional Democrats? Sure. But how do you think that would have worked? With someone who hates Donald Trump that much and would be using that agency to take down him and the things he was interested in, you'd be like, what a terrible pick. Why would he offer someone a position of that prominence who's antithetical to everything he believes? Right. That's the same reason that the DNC wasn't going to bring RFK in.
Well, the assumption, though, was, my assumption was going into this, that Donald Mr. Trump himself, may have not honored the agreement. I'm actually shocked that he's actually pushing for it.
I had this conversation last week. Someone brought it up. There was once more from the mainstream media, an anonymously sourced thing that said someone on Trump's team said we're screwing RFK over. Now, it could have happened. But again, that's why I didn't get excited about it. I'm like, how many times are we going to be burned? Anonymously sourced. And then when I was reading, it was like, Trump's been seen with RFK several times since that. And it's like, well, if he's really screwing this guy over, at this point, why wouldn't he just say, okay, dude, you're out? What's the point of leading him along now if the dude's going to find out in a week or two? What's even the point? So it seems skeptical to me, but I'm very happy. I'm very happy for the reasons I said. One, that I think that it is the right thing to do because I do think that he owes RFK a lot to him being elected. In fact, I hesitate to even say this because I was wrong. Trump's team won. I thought that they would lose. I thought that the corruption and the institutional bias would be too much against them. So I was absolutely wrong about that. So far be it from me to say, well, let me nitpick what they did in the campaign that should have been better. But one of the things that if I was to do that, I was going to say was, I think they could have used RFK better. I think that for me on the debate stage, he should have continually been talking about like, this isn't just me. This is a coalition of people. You have someone who's traditionally progressive left-wing like RFK. You have someone who's traditionally centrist like Elon Musk. You have people that are more centrist lefty like Tulsi Gabbard. all of us are coming together because we see the institutional corruption in all of these agencies. And that's why we're running. It's a team effort. I thought that he could have did a better job in that because I understood the importance of those RFK voters. Now, I think that probably enough of those voters went for Trump that it ended up making a difference, particularly in swing states, particularly in a state like here in Pennsylvania, where I know people that are big RFK fans that voted for Trump because under the hope of, look, if I vote for him, I think RFK will have a seat at the table. And I think those people deserved to have a seat at the table. And so I'm glad it happened. And I also think it is the most optimistic I've been since the pandemic that we'll get some accountability for people that were the worst during the pandemic, like Fauci, like Peter Hotez. So I'm all for it. I say good. And if he could do other things that would be good, like getting pharmaceutical commercials off of television and, helping Americans be more healthy, that's all gravy to me. So,
Yeah, I'm excited for it. I think one of the things that's unhinged too from the Democratic side is if you don't like how the government's this big and people that you don't like can control it, why do you keep advocating it for it to be bigger?
Well, it's always like everything. So much. I don't want to say everything. So much of what they claim to believe is such a contradiction. Like, for example, they've talked to me for years about institutional racism, right? Or systemic racism. Well, what's systemic racism? Well, our systems, our institutions are racist. And yet, they are in line with what every one of those institutions says. How can that be? If you really wanted to burn shit down because Black Lives Matter and systemic racism, why weren't you in Washington? Why weren't you in Hollywood? Right? Why weren't you at CNN's corporate office? Why weren't you at the places that have institutional power? Instead, you're burning down black neighborhoods? What's their institutional power? This shit happens all the time. Like, they'll say, well, I don't like money in politics. And yet you vote for the party that spends 3-1 on presidential elections. How do you explain it? Right? And I've been saying, I got laughed at when I said, the Democrats are the party of the very rich and the very poor. Ha ha ha! Who was it I was debating? That First Amender guy that read poetry. Oh, yeah, Elon's a billionaire. Right. So you could pick to some handful that aren't involved in that. That's sure, you could do that with anyone. The example I gave was like, well, that would be like saying, if I said black people traditionally vote for Democrats and you said, but I know a black guy that's voting Republican. Cool. That doesn't disprove the statement. Right? And we can see that's backed up. The majority of more wealthy donors voted for, or wealthy people voted for Kamala than voted for Trump. Now, why is that? If you're interested in getting money out of politics, and now they are all of a sudden again. They didn't have a problem when Zuckerberg was putting Zuckerbucks. They didn't have a problem when Soros is funding prosecutors. That was all good. Those billionaires were good. Those are good billionaires. But now that they lost an election and they look at Elon Musk, they go, this isn't fair. This isn't right. We need to get money out of politics. It's the same shit over and over and over again. If Trump's in office and all of a sudden they decide we're going to start a war on disinformation and we think that, what a bunch of these left-wing commentators and streamers are saying on places like X and YouTube, we're going to push for those platforms to censor them. Do you think all of a sudden they'll say, well, they're a private business, they could do what they want? No, they'll say, this is interference, this is against our First Amendment. They just don't give a shit. It's because they're not interested. Not all Democrats, I'm not saying this, but the ones that are like the commentary class, they don't give a shit. To them, it's all comes down to this calculus. We're good and you're bad. So the rules don't apply to us. We can do whatever the hell we want if it means keeping you out of power because you're bad. And so if that means billionaires help us and we say, yay, billionaires, and then they help you and we say, this is unethical, this is terrible, then we'll say that. The rules shouldn't apply to us because we're good people. If we say government corruption and, oh my God, it's terrible, but then we cheer for the size of the government to grow if it means that our side has control over it, they don't give a shit. How many people did you hear saying, there's not enough justices on the court, we need to pack the court? Chuck Schumer, for example. Chuck Schumer paid lip service to possibly packing the court and ending the filibuster. That's what he said going into the election. Now that Republicans won, he's like, well, we need bipartisanship. We have to honor norms. We don't want Republicans doing anything crazy like packing the court. Someone I've talked to many times on the show, Josiah, he was adamant we needed to pack the court. So I reached out to him after the election and said, hey, you still for court packing? Let's get Trump to put an additional, let's go up to 13 justices, right? Let's put 4 new MAGA judges in there, right? Oh, it's
Hell
different.
Yeah.
Now it's different. Now it's different. Oh, that would be terrible. That would be devastating for the country. In other words, I just want the court to be how I want it. And if that means adding seats so that it more represents what I want, so be it. And if that means not adding seats, then so be it. Whatever. I don't give a shit about that. I just want to win. That's what it is. And so when you look at it through that lens, it's like, oh, it doesn't have to logically make sense. They don't give a shit that they're hypocrites because to them, they're just like, of course. Like, break it down at the basis level. Wouldn't you have stopped Hitler? Wouldn't you? You might be against violence, but if you could punch Hitler in the face and it would have ended the entire Third Reich, wouldn't you have done it? Okay, well, we're facing Hitler. So, doesn't matter. The rules are off the table. We could do whatever the hell we want. And that doesn't mean that they're going to escalate to the worst thing immediately, but they'll take incremental steps. You shouldn't have a voice on social media. We should. Our voice should be amplified. Yours should be de-amplified. We should use lawfare to go after you and people that you support. It's absurd and horribly unethical for you to use lawfare against us. And that could go all the way up to, and again, I hate to pick on this person, but the Reddit stream of Destiny, where I saw people after Destiny was making those claims about effing around and finding out if you were a Trump supporter who gets shot and murdered at one of his rallies. And people were sending me screenshots of Destiny's Reddit where people were saying, listen, we tried, Trump's so evil. God, Emperor, King Trump, he's so evil. We tried to stop him through lawfare. We're trying to stop him through elections. But if that doesn't work, we must still stop him. We have to then use other tactics. Right. Like shooting people. That's what's, not everyone, but that's what a large amount of these people believe. The logical extension of, if you think me and my side is moral and our opponents are all immoral, then the rules don't apply. Because it's always okay to break the rules to stop someone evil from coming into power. And you don't need to break the biggest rules first. You just break the smallest rule that you can. We're for censorship. That's okay. Censorship. Court packing. Okay. And the filibuster. But what happens when that doesn't work? So, yeah, for me, you're right to point out the contradiction, but they don't give a shit. They would literally, they'll literally tell you today how immoral it would be to pack the court. And then if something happened, if a judge, the Supreme Court came out and goes, actually, there was a problem. It turns out Kamala won the election. They would immediately go, oh, pack the court, Kamala. Immediately. Like it wouldn't even take, just like, remember when they all lied about Joe Biden's cognitive decline? They were like, this is bullshit. There's nothing there. It's all cheap fix. And then literally 15 minutes after he dropped out, they're like, Trump's too old. He has cognitive decline. That's who these people are. They don't give a shit. They're shameless. Remember how they flipped out about Tony Hinchcliffe telling a joke? And they were like, oh, this proves that Trump people hate Puerto Ricans. And then the next day, Joe Biden said that Trump supporters were garbage. And they were like, oh, no, that doesn't mean that. There was an apostrophe. And either way, Joe Biden's not running for president. No shit, neither's Tony Hinchcliffe. And they don't give a shit. The contradiction means nothing to them. They just, and again, I want to differentiate. I don't mean your friend down the street that's a Democrat. That's not who I'm talking about. They may be like that, but I know plenty of sober-minded Democrats that aren't like that at all. They're not deeply invested in this stuff, looking at the ins and outs. They didn't give a shit that Tony Hinchcliffe told a joke. They might say, yeah, it was stupid to say that on the stage, but whatever. That's not affecting my decision. But the commentary class, the people I deal with, they just don't care. It goes back to, I'll see if I can find the clip. I used to play this clip all the time, and it was outside Netflix headquarters. And you had a bunch of transgender employees and supporters that were protesting Netflix because they put a Dave Chappelle special on Netflix, and he made jokes that the transgender community wasn't happy about. And so this comedian, I think it was from Dick Masterson's show, Vito. I could be wrong.
Yeah, Vito and Dick both went there. Dick ended up getting head trauma. They pushed him into a concrete. They pushed him into a concrete anti-homeless barrier, and he ended up having like a brain injury.
I didn't know that, but I saw Vito. Vito's holding a sign that basically it's like a broomstick with a sign on it.
Yes.
It said what did it say? Like comedy's funny or something. Like that.
We like jokes.
We like jokes. That was it, right? And so like the footage, it's truly amazing. Right, he goes up and he's holding this sign, and all of a sudden people surround him and they start getting pissed, and they rip his sign from him, and they rip the sign portion off. So now it looks like he's just holding a stick. And so immediately when the person that's assaulted him and took the sign starts screaming, he's got a weapon! And now think of the insanity of these are people that probably were defund the police people that destroy someone's property to now make it look like it wasn't a harmless sign, but it's a weapon. Then immediately, like within 5 seconds, start screaming, He's got a weapon in an attempt to get authority or law enforcement to do something about it. So the whole situation, it's like, wow, this is so horrible. And Vito says, why are you doing this? And the person in the crowd says, because you're awful.
Yeah, you know what the funny part about that too? You know Vito's driver's license says he's a woman?
Oh, does it? There you go.
Does he filled it out that way?
Good for him.
So-
Or her. I'm sorry. Good for her.
It's the ultimate troll.
But you can see that's a small scale snapshot. It's a small scale snapshot, and it's not like they shot him. Though apparently Dick got head trauma. That's terrible. But what it illustrates is the mindset. How could you do that? You see on video. So a person physically attacks him, breaks his property, then falsely accuses him of having a weapon in an attempt to get law enforcement to intervene and to take him out. And then when asked, why would you do this? The person says, because you're awful. You're a bad person. So all of the bad acts that person took, assault, lying, bearing false witness, if you want to get religious about it, that's all legitimate. Why? Because you're bad. So when you're bad, when I do bad things against you, that's not bad. It's okay. Now take that same example to, well, why can they have all these contradictions elsewhere? That's why. Because you're bad. Because Trump's bad. You're awful. So they can do what they want. Yeah, and it's really that simple. And it sucks that it's true, because even me, I always fall into this trap where you want to assume that you're talking to people that are like, you're on an even playing field, and you could say, well, you wouldn't want like this to happen to you, right? You're right. I wouldn't want that. So then maybe you shouldn't wish that on other people. Yeah, that's a great point, but it doesn't work that way. Not with most of the people I'm talking to online that are like in the streaming community or the people that are activists. So, I mean, for me, it's, I get exactly where you're coming from, but I use that example all the time, that Vito. I've never talked to Vito or Dick or any of those guys, but I wonder if they know that
If you invited them, they go on smaller shows. Because I watched their Friday show that they do together. But yeah, they hop onto like people with like 10 people in the chat. So
yeah, I'll reach out to them. Maybe they would be cool with it. And I would love to talk about that incident, because to me, my goodness, it just sums up so much of what's wrong with our political. I mean, then you look at it. Look at it now, how you have all these people that are like, just putting video out. I showed my family. I'll never talk to them again because they voted for Trump. Even that dude I was debating the other night. Now, granted, he said that his uncle is a literal Nazi, which, okay, I guess. But I guess we're just taking words for it at this point. But, I mean, it's amazing to me the pride they... Like, what do you think you're proving? Like, you're going to... Meaningful relationships in your life, you're like, well, I'll never, that's it. I'm cutting everyone out that didn't vote the way I did it. Okay. And now what? Yeah, you're right. It probably does hurt your loved ones that are like, well, that sucks. I'd like to talk to my son. You're right. It probably does hurt them, but it's hurting you too, you dumbass. You're going to sabotage those sorts of relationships. Hey, Marcus Uno, how would you like to call in right now? Marcus Uno has a lot of claims about Trump and Epstein, and Gaetz being a sex trafficker, and Tulsi Gabbard being a Russian asset. Marcus, how would you like to call in? What do you say? You seem to have strong opinions on it, so how would you like to call in? Now's your opportunity. You could explain to us how Tulsi Gabbard's a Russian asset, and how Matt Gaetz is a child sex trafficker. Go ahead. Would you like to call in? You have 1 minute to respond, and then you'll happily not be on my channel anymore. But you clearly have strong opinions, so... By all means, we'll give you a chance to call in. It's very simple. You know how to use a computer. You'll know how to use Discord. All right.
Not to give him help, but hold on. The Matt Gaetz thing is technically true, because you can't pay for somebody to cross state lines to have sex with them. So if he did have sex with a person and it was across state lines, you're technically guilty of sex trafficking. So just by the letter of the law, that's how they're getting Diddy on his original indictment, is because he paid for women to travel to California to have sex with them.
Did he have sex with an underage girl?
The problem is, I don't know, and and so my point is, like, if he did go across the state line with an underage girl, that would count as sex trafficking. I think it's a stupid.
The problem is the if there, right? That's the problem.
For sure, they were supposed to release a report, the ethics complaint report, today. I don't know if they're going to do that anymore since he resigned.
We'll see what the evidence suggests. Until then, I don't give a shit.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat.
Trump also paid hookers to pee on him on a bed that the Obamas once stayed in. And there's a tape of him saying the N-word on The Apprentice.
No, I don't disagree, Rob. I'm 100% there. I'm just saying the term sex trafficking is very loose because all it just means is that you move from one jurisdiction to the other.
Yeah.
So if you move like across the state line, so I live in Massachusetts. If I go to Rhode Island, which is just an hour drive, to have sex with somebody and I paid them for it, that would be considered sex trafficking.
Alrighty, let's bring.
So just
yeah,
just
I don't give it. Like, your point is well taken, which has.
I'm just saying it's just.
But
it's
that's
just
the equivalent,
silly.
right? Like,
yeah.
Your point means jack shit to me, I guess is what I'm saying, because the real accusation there is not that Matt Gaetz paid a hooker; it is that he fucked an underage girl, and you being like, well, actually, that is true. What it sounds like is then you're saying, oh, it is true that he sex trafficked and slept with an underage hooker. And when you're like, oh, but I'm saying if, that's when I'm like, right, if.
No. If he pays for her travel to another state and had sex with her, that's considered sex trafficking too.
Yeah, but I just don't give a shit is what I'm saying.
I don't. Yes, I understand. But I'm just saying the term sex trafficking is so loose.
I just don't give a shit is what I'm saying. I agree. It's like disorderly conduct. Great, agree. The accusation is he slept with an underage hooker.
No, underage girl. But if you pay for her travels and stuff, you could. So, I just the letter of the law. You can be. I don't agree with it because I think it's really broad, right? If I paid you to come here to me and I compensate you a hotel room, Rob, and you and I like make out, that's considered sex trafficking. That's all I'm saying. Okay. I'm not saying like. All I'm saying is like the term sex trafficking is so broad that. Yeah, anyone could easily be charged with this in many situations. Like I just described you making out with me after I paid for your trip out here.
Okay. All right. That's hey, thanks for calling in.
All right. See you, Rob.
Yep. Take it easy. All right. Common Hope, what's happening? Can you hear me, Common Hope?
Hey, Rob. Yeah, man.
What's happening?
Oh, well, that was a great conversation. I didn't catch the end there. I'm not caught up. So actually,
we were just talking about the definition of sex trafficking, which I do not give a shit about whatsoever. The caller claims that if I pay for you to come here and hang out and have a barbecue and I make out with you, I just sex trafficked you because paying for you to travel across state lines. I don't know if that's true or not, nor do I give a shit. The accusation that is something that people are looking at is that Gaetz had sex with an underager. There's no proof of it. There's no proof that he had sex with him that I've seen made publicly. I'm tired when people make this accusation. Trump's sex traffics underagers, had sex with an underager. I don't pay any lip service to it until they can provide proof. Go ahead, call in. You can provide proof. Let's see it. And I don't give a shit. Well, tenuous terms mean that the word sex trafficking could mean blah, 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 blah. Did he fuck this girl or not? That's it. That's my concern. Which it's not my concern. I don't give a shit because I give a shit as little as I do the litany of 10,000 accusations that anyone that stands up to the establishment that are thrown around. I don't give a shit. Put up or shut up. That's it. So that's what the end of the conversation. Not that caller was saying that. He was just explaining that the definition of the term sex trafficking is so loose. I just don't give a shit. I don't care at all. So.
No, all good. He was a great caller.
Yeah,
actually, everyone's been a great caller. And I give full permission for you. Well, you don't need my permission, but if that guy comes in or whatever, you can kick me off and grab him.
He ain't coming in. He knows. Just another lefty troll. But I'm not going to have people throwing potentially slanders or libelous allegations into my chat if they're not willing to defend it, because it does show up on my screen. And so if someone's going to say that Matt Gaetz slept with an underage, sex trafficked an underage girl, then he better be willing to provide receipts for that, or else they can go away. Because I don't want my channel to ever get marked for having accusations like that in writing on my channel that people are unwilling to give any evidence to back up. So
surely they would have vetted him though, right? They would have like if you're Trump's campaign or what, maybe they don't give a shit either. Maybe no one gives a shit, but
yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Like, look, this is this is a real difficult conversation to have, right?
Yeah,
I think that it's incredibly. I think it's real shitty if you're like how old's Matt Gaetz? I don't know, late 30s, 40. I don't know. Probably shitty to be sleeping with an 18-year-old. The idea that somehow magically when someone's 18, on their 18th birthday, it's okay, but it's 17 in a day, it's not. It's like, to me, it's like, it's bad either way. It is. And if it's illegal, it's illegal, right? But the moral, like, to me, when I'm talking about real heinous sex stuff, I'm talking about people trying to sleep with, like, 14-year-olds and younger, right? And even 15 and 16, you can see, like, if the accusation is that she was 17, then there's questions like, to me, that's a different level of that you tried to sleep with like an 11-year-old, but it's still not good. It's still morally reprehensible. Then the question becomes, did you know she was 17? What was going on? I don't know. It's easy to throw that accusation out because it's so universally condemned. You slept with an underager. And so everyone's like, just like that article I was reading from Molly Hemingway. What happens is everyone's like, oh, shit, I ain't going to touch out with the 10-foot pole. Fuck that guy, right? But what if it's false? What if someone smears you with that? Like, what would you do? No one's going to defend you. You're just like, well, shit, I don't know. Like, I didn't do that. And it's like, what if you did you ever see that movie? What was it called? It was with Tom Cruise. Wilford Brimley was in it as well, where he's like working, was it The Firm? I think it was called The Firm. Right, where he's a young lawyer and he gets hired at this hotshot firm. And one of the things they do is he goes on like this retreat for the company, and this very attractive woman comes up to him on the beach and basically starts making out with him, and he sleeps with her. And then they take pictures of it. And then they're asking him to do all this illegal shit. And he's like, I'm not comfortable with this. And Wilford Brimley's the head of security, and he just hands him this packet, and he opens it up, and it's just pictures of him banging this lady. And he's like, hey, like, you're going to do this shit, or, we're going to blackmail you. Like, I don't know. Like, this is why, for someone like me, it's very simple. Here's my rule. I'm married, so I'm not flirting with anyone. So I assume that every conversation I have with someone on stream or off stream in a place like Discord or DMs and X, I assume all of it will inevitably be released. So you're not going to find Discords of me talking to some girl. Oh, yeah, you look really hot, blah, blah, blah. And then it turns out like, oh, she was 17. Oh, shit. Look what Rob did. Like, yeah, that's not going to be a risk for me because I'm an old boomer and I don't really talk. I don't even talk to people I know on Aircraft Sparky's the only one that I've had conversation with on here, like behind the scenes in Discord. So, for me, if you're a congressman, even if, I don't know, was he single? You probably don't know this. But let's assume he was single.
I don't know. I don't give a shit.
Yeah, if you're single, like, and you're a congressman, like, you're a fucking idiot if you're hooking up with, like, random chicks. Like, control yourself, right? Just control yourself. Find someone that you meet, that you go out to dinner with a couple times, that you know them, that there's no question whatsoever that there's something untoward going on, and then develop a relationship with them. Control yourself. That would be my advice. And so if he was, even if Gaetz is just hooking up with chicks on Tinder, that's really bad judgment for a congressperson. But I don't give a shit. We have a litany of congresspeople with bad judgments. I give a shit if he slept with an underager, but I don't give a shit about the accusation because the accusation's been played out. Literally everyone that like establishment people don't like are a Russian asset, or they slept with an underager. So how many times do you have to hear this shit before you say, I just don't give a shit anymore, provide the proof or shut the fuck up? It's that simple. And I'm sorry if the crime is he slept with some chick that was 17 years old and 11 months and he thought she was 18. I don't think that's a huge deal. Now, if he knew she was underage, that's different. But that's my take on the whole.
Yeah.
I just don't give a shit. It's clearly, and again, it comes from bad faith people that had no problem with Biden and his kid sniffing and the accusation that he sexually assaulted Tara Reid and the fucking his daughter's diaries showing that he inappropriately shot. I don't give a fuck what those people have to say about it. I don't give a shit. I don't care at all. So fuck them. I know I'm again doing exactly what I said we need to stop doing. But I'm bringing it up because other people brought it up because it was brought up as a question. Now I'm talking about it 40 minutes later, and it's like, I just don't give a shit. So that's my final statement on Matt Gaetz as far as those accusations.
Yeah, no, fair. I mean, it's going to get brought up at the confirmation. It's absolutely good. Well, hopefully we have more proof by then so that you can actually make a...
Well, put it this way. If if Gaetz did this, if you're Gaetz and you did this, I'll just ask you directly, would you have taken this position? Because don't you know that it's going to be investigated even more?
Well, from what I understand, I know nothing about this, by the way. But from what I've heard, it's like he just resigned from Congress, so there's not going to be any, or the Senate. What is he? What is he? A Senate? So the report on his, so the report on this isn't going to come out, or it will. I don't know. That's why I asked about.
Well, maybe that's, but still, then I would just resign and not put my name in the hat for AG, like because.
Yeah.
It's like, this is true in politics. I assume it's true in Australia. It's true anywhere. There's vetting that occurs, and there's legitimate vetting, which is people are actually looking into things about your life and things about your political career. So let me give you an example of that. Like, let's say that you are a state congressman here in Pennsylvania, so Harrisburg, right? And you don't show up to 80% of the votes. Most of your people don't know that. Thanks, Bernstein, for the follow. Like, most of the voters don't know that because you're probably in a district where you're running unopposed. But then all of a sudden you run for national level Congress. Well, now there's going to be more people that look into it, and they're going to say, hey, this guy didn't show up for 80% of the votes. Now, because you're on a bigger stage, there's more investigation into you. That might be you cheated on your wife. Well, no one really looked into it when you're running for state Congress. But now that you're running for senator, oh boy, now it becomes a national story. So for me, it's like, if you have skeletons in your closet that you're really embarrassed about, running for big national office seems like, that the spotlight's going to be put on you, or, now I guess if you're a Democrat, it's okay because, they'll cover up for you. But, if you're someone like Matt Gaetz, if Matt Gaetz slept with an underager, my advice to him would be like, hey, dude, I would withdraw from Congress and I would not run for AG. I would disappear for a couple years, do the speaking circuit. But I don't know. Like I said, I don't want people to say, if Gaetz did this shit, like, Rob defended him, blah, blah, blah. I'm not defending him. I'm saying the accusation means nothing to me. The accusation means as little to me as if, let's just take someone random from the chat. Poop Golem 69. If Poop Golem 69 was to say in the chat right now, hey, this guy Rob's talking to is a serial killer, it would mean nothing to me. I would say, who the fuck are you? Where's your proof? That's it. It means nothing. That's how I feel about it. A bunch of lefties that have an incentive, and establishment righties that have an incentive to go after people that challenge them are smearing this guy. Cool. Let's see the proof. That's it. So yeah. But I do think that if in general, if anyone's listening and you're wondering, if you cheated on your wife and you're worried about that coming out, you probably don't want to run for national level politics because it'll probably come out. So,
Yeah, it's just I don't know. It's going to get dragged through confirmation no matter what. And it's a gray area with the 7-tier. I could give a shit. But
dude, that's such a tough conversation. I don't even know how you could broach it because people just want to be like, well, you're a monster. And it's like, I understand that the problem with laws is they're going to have to be somewhat arbitrary. For example, a speed limit law. Are you really breaking the law? If you're in a speed limit that's 55 mile an hour and you're going 56, is that really considerably more dangerous than going 55? No, but you have to have a cutoff, right? Like there has to be, like, so age of consent, what would the law be? Like if it wasn't just a cutoff age like that? Like maturity level? Well, how the hell do you measure that?
Yeah. No,
and
you
so
can't. It's
So you have to have the law, and if the law means the age of consent's 18, and you slept with the chick 3 days before she turned 18, sorry, dude, you broke the law. And I guess you should be held accountable. Maybe the judge could have some leniency, but yeah, it's against the law. The general principle, though, is I think that you should try to have relationships with people around your age. Now, I say that my wife's 5.5 years younger than me, so maybe I'm a monster. But yeah, it's a tough conversation to have because it's easy to just be like, well, child sex bullshit and it's all gross and screw all these people. I agree to an extent, but like I think there are different levels of it. Like I don't know that the guy's irredeemable that was 25 and he slept with a 17-year-old. I do know the guy that was 25 and slept with a 10-year-old is irredeemable. Right? There's a considerable difference to those sort of actions, but there's no nuance in the conversation where people just want to be like, oh, no, it's all the same. It's all child sex stuff and it's terrible. There, see, now I'm being accused of being a cradle robber.
Yeah,
My wife was
oh,
21 when
so-
we went on our first date, so
Rob Cradle Robber are terrible. Oh, that reminds me of Horseman
horse manure,
Noir.
yeah, horse
Horse
manure.
manure,
Yeah.
yeah, I remember. Yeah.
Mr. Griff, my
Fantastic.
gym teacher. He also sometimes he'd call me Iggy for ignore. So he was
Ah,
he's quite the character. Here's a story about Griff. One time we used to play like
Yeah.
handball or stuff in the gym, and they'd pull out the bleachers. They would retract or come out, and so just the first seat of the bleachers would come out. So while you're waiting, it's like baseball. You're waiting in line to have your at bat, so you'd be sitting on these one row of bleachers. And Griff has his notebook and he's keeping notes and keeping score and he's grading you for gym class, right? So there was this kid. He was kind of a goofball, and he leans up on the edge of this bleachers was a ladder, and he leans up against it, and the ladder fell, and it fell directly. So if you can imagine just a single bench, the ladder was falling where it would have literally hit every single person on this bench. But we all see the ladder coming, and we get out of the way, except Griff, who's writing in his notebook. And this ladder, the very end of it clonks him right in the top of his bald head, and he just starts gushing blood. And he was none
Oh.
too pleased. This guy was a youth pastor. He was also my youth pastor. I'd never heard the guy like use a curse word. He let out a string of obscenities that was one of the funniest things I ever heard. And then, of course, the next week at church, he's like, I apologize for that. That hurt significantly bad. I'm like, yeah, no shit, dude. You had to get like 8 stitches. But yeah, so that's what he gets for calling me horse manure. You know, that was
Yeah.
karma striking back on him. It was he's
yeah,
a good
that's
guy.
exactly what God wanted.
See, he should have been a little more polite with my name. But no, I always thought it was funny. I don't mind the mocking of names. The Grayson Hawk was upset that people were calling him Gayson Hawk. Sorry, dude. Blame your parents. They should have named you Grayson, I guess. You know.
Yeah, you don't want anything that sort of rhymes with gay.
Well, my son Hank's 3 years old. That was a serious conversation I had. Like, what sort of names will he get picked on, like at the playground, you know? And so Hank seems
that's
pretty
exactly
solid. What are
right,
you gonna
yeah.
call Hank? I don't know. I don't know how you could. He's not Henry. He's Hank. But there's, I'm trying to think. Like, I don't know. People
I
just
got
pick on
nothing,
me.
but chat's it'll catch up and
Yeah,
it'll be there in like 5 minutes.
I don't know that I'm willing to ask the chat. Come up. Yeah, Tank's fine. Well, that's fine. Stank. Okay. Fuck you, people. I should have just kept it to myself. But you wanted to talk about RFK?
Yeah, mate, that was my topic for tonight. But I had to get Patches in because I was chatting to him beforehand in the waiting room, and he brought up those numbers about the his RFK is polling 6% here, 7% here, and whatever. And I'm like, well, that's really interesting. And then I asked him, could that have swung the election? And he said, it looks like, yeah. So basically, RFK saved the world.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that it, like I said, I do think that it probably did put Trump over the finish line, at least in some of these states. Now, there is an argument to be had that Trump's win was so significant that maybe he wins even without RFK. But I think what people need to realize is his significant victory was that he took all of the swing states. So if you just take 2 of those swing states and it goes the other way, now it's an incredibly close election. So if you could look at a state like Pennsylvania where it looks like he's going to end up winning by 2 points, maybe. Was RFK enough to swing those 2 points? Maybe. Not only if RFK had been in the race, but imagine RFK would have endorsed the Democrats. Now let's say, instead of now getting his 4%, you split it, and that's enough for you to win. What if all 4 of that percent goes to the Democrats? So, yeah, I definitely think. Now, listen, this is an argument, though. There is a significant argument that occurs here with some of the right-wingers that I talk about, such as Andrew Wilson, right? Andrew Wilson would say, I don't know how much of a problem he would have with RFK, but in general, he would say, making your party more of a big tent party is bad because then it loses sight. We don't really have a conservative party anymore because we have gay people in it, and we have women, and we have people like RFK. And what's the point of having a party if it doesn't represent the values that you initially wanted? To which, of course, I respond 2 things. 1, I'm selfish. And what I want has nothing to do with someone's sexuality or those other issues, being a woman or a man. I want an end to the corruption. And so I don't give a shit if you're gay, if you're going to vote for us to help end corruption. I don't give a shit that you identify as being on the left. I don't give a shit that you're a woman. makes no difference to me. But I can understand that if you're a Christian nationalist, why that would be something that you would be like, well, no, we're getting too far. All of a sudden, gay marriage will be something that we never talk about again. I get it. So from that perspective, not necessarily Andrew Wilson, but take like sort of a traditional fiscal conservative, you might look at someone like RFK and say, well, this sucks. There, see, Nick Dev says RFK is a liberal Democrat. He's a grifter. Right, that's going to be it. So then the calculus that you have to like weigh to those people is like, okay, so then let's assume that what we're talking about is right, that Trump wouldn't have won without RFK. So then all the good stuff that theoretically could come for conservatives or for someone like Nick Dev, right? Appointments that Trump likes, policies that he helps push that Trump likes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All of that is gone now, but at least we didn't have RFK. Is it worth it?
Supreme Court justices.
Right, exactly. Is it worth it? And that's like,
no.
I get it, right? Like there are certain issues where I understand it. It's difficult to talk to someone who believes that life begins at conception and tell them, like my friend Aircraft Sparky, he's a big abortion abolitionist, right? No abortions ever. He might have some exception for the life of the mother. Other than that, no abortions ever. Life begins at conception. Okay, but if you run on that, you will lose every time. You will lose. And the response is going to be, if winning means we have to murder babies, then I don't give a shit. Would you physically go murder a baby if it ensured that your politician won? If the answer is no, then why would you vote for a politician that will ensure the murder of babies and say, well, at least we get the economic policies we want? And it's a persuasive argument from that point of view. I understand that. And it's hard for me to look at a person that truly believes that life begins at conception. And now Sparky's a little more pragmatic. He's like, no, I'm okay with having less abortions, which will result under Trump. But as far as issues like liberal grifter, like if I could ask Nick Dev, like specifically in what? Like, for example, he's not good on gun policy. He's not good on energy policy. Yeah, I agree. But would it have been worth it to say, well then, fuck it. We'll sabotage the entire party and we'll lose the election because we don't want RFK stink anywhere near this because we don't like him on energy policy? I don't think so. I think that it's a mistake. So I think that in politics, it's important to stand by your promises, and particularly the people that helped you. And RFK did, and I'm sure that there was a conversation that RFK had with Trump that was like, listen, I will be willing to endorse you, but here's the sort of things I want out of your administration. And I think that it's fair that Trump tries to honor that promise to RFK, because if not for the endorsement of RFK, I don't know that he wins. So.
Yeah, well, that's very well taken, Rob. I was just reading a chat here. So,
Sure.
For this tweet, X Moon Girl X 1999. So can I ask you a question? It's a broad question. I don't actually know how it works in the US. So how it works down here, or in any parliamentary system, mate, our politicians they don't know anything about anything. They get they get votes. They usually have like a law degree, maybe a commerce degree or something. They're in government, and then they get a portfolio in health or something, and now they're the minister for health. Is there some sort of requirement over there, or like an expectation that do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like, do your politicians have to be trained, or is that?
Well, no, right? So I believe, if I'm looking at the post I think you're looking at, she's commenting on Pete Hegseth, who is a Fox News correspondent or Fox News host, who's been appointed to Secretary of Defense, right? So, a politician, you can be anything. Trump was a businessman. So there's not really an expectation. There's advantages. There's certainly no law, right? So you don't have to have a career in politics to become a politician, right? As far as expectations, well, there's pros and cons to everything, right? Like, let's take Trump versus Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton's a career politician. There's advantages to that, right? She knows how the system works. She'll be able to hit the ground running. Like, she has built-in relationships with foreign leaders, and she understands the ins and outs of how bureaucracy works. And so that means she's more likely to be able to get things done. Those are all true. Those are advantages. Donald Trump is a complete outsider to politics. But actually, that's an advantage as well in some. Yes, he doesn't have any of those things Hillary Clinton has, but if you're the type of person that is upset and feels like the current gears of bureaucracy doesn't work for you, then you want an outsider. And you're able to say, look, if things haven't been going well, I haven't been there. Hillary Clinton's been there for decades. So if she's complaining about how things run, what has she done? It's the same with Joe Biden. He's been in office 47 years in some capacity. What have you done? So when you stand up and say, this country's economy isn't working for poor people, you've been there for 47 years, dude. Right? So to be an outsider is a potential benefit. But that's specific to politicians and winning an election. That's different than appointments. So in the executive, and this is actually, it's difficult to understand from an outside perspective. Probably it's even difficult to understand for me and for people that live here. The real power in Washington isn't Congress. I talked to that Spoonie guy the other day on Jake Rattlesnake's show. He said the real power is in Congress and he wants a stronger executive. That's actually exactly backwards. Congress doesn't do jack shit. Like, they're terrible. Like, when we're going to war, Congress is supposed to vote. They don't anymore. They're supposed to control the power of the purse. They don't. They sign off on shit and say this is the dollars that will be spent, and then the executive is the agencies that sort of show where those dollars will go, and they just basically do whatever the hell they want. And there's no accountability. The real power in Washington isn't the Congress people. It's not the courts. It's not even the president. It's the bureaucracy and the executive agency. It's the EPA. It's the IRS. It's the FBI. It's the CIA. It's the State Department. It's HHS. That's where the power is. And none of those people are elected. None. They are all appointed. They all exist as executive agencies, so that means theoretically the president is their boss. But what happens is we're talking tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of employees. Like, you're not going to have one individual that's president that sits there and goes, okay, Jim Smith, we're looking to hire as like the seventh down the line at the DOJ, and that's not how it's going to work. You're probably going to appoint someone as the head of that department and then trust their judgment. They're going to appoint someone who's going to appoint lower level people, but the president's not like involved in the appointment of these 10,000, if not 100,000 people. He's not involved with that. And basically, those agencies are the ones that are really running shit. I think those agencies are incompetent and corrupt. That's my belief. But who's qualified to be in those agencies? That's the question. Who would be qualified to be the Attorney General? Who would be qualified to be the head of Health and Human Services? Who is qualified to be the head of the IRS? Well, most of the time what you'll be told is the people that are qualified are the people that have already been involved in those sorts of agencies. Now, notice the same people screaming about, I see someone mentions Buttigieg, the same people that were appointed under the Biden administration that didn't have shit all to say when, like, Pete Buttigieg was Secretary of Transportation. What were his qualifications? He liked trains. He wasn't an engineer. He wasn't someone who built automobiles. He wasn't someone that worked on a road crew. Nope. But there he is, head of Secretary of Transportation. They were fine with that because they didn't question his qualifications. Why? Because Pete Buttigieg is a politician. He's sort of someone who knows about bureaucracy. That's good. When these people are questioning credentials, what they're really questioning is they don't give a shit, right, about whether or not this person would know about the ins and outs of this specific thing. What they're really questioning is they're saying he's not qualified because he's not part of the bureaucracy. And that's bad because they like the bureaucracy, because the bureaucracy currently favors their political ideology. They're good with that. They like a DOJ that aggressively targets Trump and all of his people. That's good for them. What they don't want is someone at DOJ that'll say, let's actually look at the corrupt people that targeted Trump and his people. That doesn't work for them. That person won't be qualified because they're from outside. So let's take Pete Hegseth specifically. Pete Hegseth isn't qualified to run, what was he, Secretary of Defense? Is that what he's been appointed as? He has 2 Bronze Stars. Served in our military. What about him makes that not qualified then? So he's someone who is a hero that served in our military. Wasn't like me. Wasn't me that was appointed as Secretary of Defense. A hero that got Bronze Stars. But he worked at Fox News. So that's no good. He's just a Fox News host. He graduated from Yale. But he's not qualified. So who would have been qualified? Well, someone like Miley, who believes in DEI, who believes in aggressively targeting white people to see if they were involved with January 6th or racism. Right, you weren't involved with this past Moon Girl. You listened to the media and the Democrat criticism and said, this guy works for Fox, how's he qualified? And that's the problem. I'm not saying you're a terrible person. I get it. That's the messaging that's out there. Gaetz has no lawyer experience. It's a worse case than Hegseth in saying that he's not qualified, but the qualification that's necessary is that he's distrusting of the FBI, which is good. The next best thing to disbanding the FBI is to put someone in there that will be hypercritical of them. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I think it's just a fundamental difference in values. I mean, at this stage in Trump's career, as president, he's got 4 years left. He wants to get as much done as he can. He doesn't want any pushback, and so you just have to back whatever he wants to put in there. Well,
it's not even that I know that he might be like, if all things equal, and Donald Trump and RFK are sitting at dinner, I could see them arguing about specific policies. I could see RFK pushing back. To me, it's not as much about like that he just wants yes men. I think he wants people that he can trust aren't going to stab him in the back. And who could blame him? Who could blame him at all after the first term? The constant leaks, the constant lying from his own people. I mean, think of this. Think of how insane this is. We have this 4-year investigation into Trump about Russia collusion. By the way, something that I haven't heard anyone talk about is we now have a whistleblower from the FBI that's saying actually the investigation into Trump started a year before the FBI is claiming. At the personal order of James Comey, the head of the FBI. I mentioned it briefly on my show. Maybe we'll do a whole show about this. But I'd been saying for years, mark my words, we'll eventually find out that when the FBI told us the official start date of the investigation into Trump's team was, actually they were looking into Trump's team before it. Mark it down. I've been saying that for years. Now it turns out at least one whistleblower is saying that's the case. Nonetheless, so Trump gets into office, he appoints as his Attorney General Jeff Sessions, who, by the way, wasn't very qualified either. He puts Jeff Sessions there, and one of the first things that happens is the Democrats demand that Jeff Sessions recuse himself as having oversight of the FBI, which is his job as the Attorney General. He is basically the boss of the FBI. He has to recuse himself when it comes to the FBI's investigation into Trump Russia. So the biggest thing that the FBI was doing, targeting Trump, illegally spying on him, the Attorney General that was appointed by Trump was forced to be recused because Democrats screamed and gnashed their teeth. This guy can't be there. He's involved. He's involved with Russia. He can't oversee it. He's involved. He's involved. And so they got what they wanted. Jeff Sessions recuses, the FBI investigation turns into the Mueller investigation, and we have years and years of this, which leads to impeachment proceedings, etc. It was the biggest story in the country for 3 years. It's all the media talked about on a nightly basis. You could tune in, hear them talking about it over and over again. This time, Trump says, fuck you. I'm going to appoint who I want. Eat shit. Which is exactly what he should do. That's exactly what he should do. That's what Democrats do. They don't have a problem with it. They wield power. Media is totally cool with it. I don't give a shit what the New York Times thinks about Trump's cabinet picks. Don't give a shit. I could care less. Eat shit. In fact, their tiers and when I see someone like Pisco or someone like Destiny or someone from the New York Times or someone like Rachel Maddow or someone like John Brennan, former head of the CIA, say, this is the worst pick ever, I'm like, wow. If I know nothing else, that strongly suggests that this is a good pick. Because the worst people that don't want the corruption to be overturned are saying, no, this is bad. Good. That's how I feel about it. So eat shit. They had no problem when they were appointing sycophants to the cabinet under Joe Biden or under Barack Obama, and that those agencies were being weaponized. They didn't have a problem with Lois Lerner targeting conservatives at the IRS. Didn't have a problem with the DOJ going after Trump supporters, going after Trump, going after parents at school board meetings, going after pro-life people. It was all good. They were cool with all that shit. Okay. So I don't give a shit what your take is on Matt Gaetz. Don't care. That's how I feel about it. I don't give a shit that you don't think Pete Hegseth is qualified because he was on Fox News. Eat shit. I think it's absurd that we have so many of these people that go from these agencies to then become correspondents. Like James Clapper, head of the NSA, who lies under oath and says we don't willingly spy on it. Collect data on Americans, a blatant lie, a blatant violation of our Fourth Amendment rights. Then all of a sudden he's a correspondent at CNN when he leaves. Oh, and by the way, or I'm sorry, I'm thinking of Brennan at the CIA. By the way, when CNN wanted a hook to run the Steele dossier, Brennan goes to Comey and says, hey, CNN's thinking of running this Steele dossier story. And then Comey goes, I better talk to Trump about it. So then Comey goes and talks to Trump. And then CNN says, oh, we've just been informed that Comey talked to Trump about this dossier. Let's talk about it. So CNN got exactly what they wanted because the former head of the CIA talked to the head of the FBI and told him, we're thinking of running this story. We just need a hook. And Comey said, let me go talk to Trump about that. And then the former head of the CIA says, hey, CNN, I got your hook. The head of the FBI just talked to Trump about this dossier. That means we could report on it now. I think that's a problem. I have more of a problem with Brennan ending up at CNN than someone from CNN ending up in Brennan's position. That seems to be worse. And again, the Democrats have no problem with the revolving door of lobby. How many people at Health and Human Services or at the FDA ended up working on the board of Big Pharma companies? Didn't have a problem with it. Totally cool. How many people from pharma ended up back at Health and Human Services, the FDA? Didn't have a problem with it. But holy shit, you put an outsider like RFK there and they lose their mind. He's not qualified. This is terrible. You see the problem? That's how I look at it.
Perfect segue there, Rob. How much time you got left on your stream here?
I got 10 minutes.
Oh God. Okay. Okay. I didn't get to talk about RFK at all, but that's all right.
Yeah.
Okay, so
there's one more person in the chat. So
yeah, I know. I'm going to wrap it up right here. So I just wanted to read out this. I had prep, so this RFK quote from X. A beautiful segue by you, by the way. You didn't even know.
I knew it. We communicated beforehand. So yeah.
He said, yeah, we did. It says, together we will clean up corruption. This is RFK. Together we will clean up corruption, stop the revolving door between industry and government, and return our health agencies to their rich tradition of gold standard evidence-based science. I will provide Americans with transparency and access to all the data so they can make informed choices for themselves and their families. So there you go.
Well, and I mean, just real quick on this, right? Like, I remember when the Democrats used to complain about groups like Big Pharma. They used to complain about it all the time. They're systemically racist. They're poisoning people. But now all of a sudden they're their biggest cheerleaders. Isn't it amazing how the Democrats do? Just like the Democrats used to be the biggest critics of our military-industrial complex, of our intel agencies. Bush lied. People died. The Cheneys are evil. They need to go to The Hague and be prosecuted. And now they're their biggest supporters. Same with Big Pharma. You know, it's just, it's amazing how quick they'll change when it suits their political ideology. But hey, come and help. Nice talking to you again. Hopefully we'll talk again soon. You, all right, take it easy, man.
Yeah, mate. Next time, I'm going to talk to you about fluoride. I got shitloads on fluoride.
Oh, that sounds good. That's right up RFK's alley, too. All right, take it easy.
Mate, it is. All right, catch ya.
Yep. All right, we got Emmett. We got like 10 minutes, so we'll have to make it a little quick. Who did I miss? Thank you so much for the follow. Man. Appreciate it. All right, Emmett, can you hear me? Let me know if you can hear me, Emmett.
Oh, I was muted. Can you hear me?
Yep. What's happening?
Hey, how you doing, Rob?
Good.
Okay. I have a problem with the framing. I wasn't gonna call in, but I have a problem with the framing of what exactly was Andrew Wilson talking when he was saying that the big tent and just like accepting everybody.
Emmett, can I ask you a question real quick? We've talked before,
sure.
Right?
Yeah, we have.
What specifically was the topic we talked about? Just curious. Do you remember?
Yeah, last time we talked about FEMA.
Okay, you didn't talk to me about like religion in the Bible, right? And like the paradox. That wasn't you, right?
I think the one you're talking about is the one that was talking about atheism and how it was like debunked.
Yeah, that wasn't you, correct?
No, that wasn't me.
Okay, because if that was you,
it was FEMA.
Because the bigger question I was going to have was because I think that was the same guy that wanted to keep talking to me about how smart Alan Lichtman is. That wasn't you, right?
No.
Okay, because I
really
hope that guy calls back in because I'm going to laugh at him for like 10 minutes. That dude over and over, I want to talk about Alan Lichtman's keys and how smart he is. So it'd be fun to rub that guy's nose in it. So apologies. That's not you. Totally cool. So sorry about that.
No, it's fine. Last time we talked about I want to talk to you about the debate when the debate was happening. And
sure.
Like
I remember.
4 weeks later.
Yep.
And then we started with the debate, and then we move on to the FEMA issue, which just exploded into the worst I don't know if you saw the report of the FEMA thing about not bringing any support to the Trump people. And
Oh,
stuff
yeah,
like that.
right? Like we were told that was all lies that Trump's team was spreading. By the way, I was going to cover that today if no one called in. That was the other story I was going to cover. So this woman who gets, for those that don't know, this woman ends up getting fired because a whistleblower came out from FEMA and said that this woman who was higher up in the agency told them not to go to homes in Florida that had Trump signs. And so therefore they were selectively choosing who to help, which is disgusting. Now that woman since came out and said, I didn't make that decision. That came from on high. Now, what's interesting is, if that's true, that's devastating. But listen to how she's talking. What she seems to be suggesting is they were given orders of certain homes not to go to because there would be a threat of violent confrontation. So in other words, don't go to the home of the guy that says, don't tread on me, or don't go to the home of the person if you see pit bulls out in the yard, shit like that. But if that's true, then the standard was being a Trump supporter it indicates that you could possibly be violent to someone who's trying to come from FEMA and bring you help, which is a huge scandal if that's what they're claiming, right? And doesn't that get to the heart of sort of the way I put it was, well, it looks like FEMA took Joe Biden's orders and thinks that Trump supporters are garbage, right? It looks like that's what happened. So yeah, that's the story in a nutshell. We'll have to see where it goes from there, but
yeah, that was pretty much the story. And we had a talk with the FEMA guy afterwards. You remember that?
Yes, yeah, it was a good talk. Yeah,
that was pretty good. And I think it kind of showed that we were not completely that the idea of what was being reported wasn't completely untrue.
And I tried to be fair. I tried, even when talking to him, I tried to be even-handed, and I admitted accusations are accusations. Let's see if proof comes. But now we at least have proofs with this one specific woman, and now she's making accusations. It wasn't just me. It came from on high. So, I don't think any of us jumped the gun and we're like, 100% definitive proof that FEMA did this. But as more evidences came out, it turns out the people that were demanding proof really didn't give a shit about proof because they've been pretty much silent now that more proofs come out.
Yep, I think so. I think you are correct in that. So what I was going to talk to you about today is pretty much the idea of what it means to have a conservative movement and why we Christian nationalists could be against some of the big tent, everybody coming, kumbaya things. The idea, I'm going to try to steelman Andrew's position during that talk and merge a little bit, try to condense it a little bit. So the idea is, if you go ahead and get every single one of the possible ideologies integrated to yours, your ideology in and of itself is going to change to the point in which it's not even what you were supposed morally to fight for.
Yeah, I think that's fair. For example, let's just put it in the easiest possible way. Let's say you have a party that represents 20% of the American public, and that party's core beliefs are surrounded in sort of Christianity. So you're against abortion, you're against gay marriage, you're for family values, and things like that. You're not winning many elections because only 20% of the electorate's with you. But then you get incrementally groups join on, 5% here, 5% here, 5% here, 5% here. And now all of a sudden you make up 50% of the electorate, but 30% of the people that are now under your party, we'll call it Republican, that was founded and for years was based on these Christian beliefs, 30% of people are like, well, we don't really give a shit about that. In fact, sometimes they're completely antithetical to it. They say, we support gay marriage. We're okay with some amount of abortion. Then as that 20% of the original people, you're looking and you're saying, yeah, I guess we won, but all that won was the name Republican, not the actual values and policies that we want. They didn't win because now the majority of our party is made up by people that don't agree with us. So that's in effect what they're saying. Would you agree that that's basically?
Yeah, that's kind of, in effect, that's what I think the belief is. And I think it's something that Democrats actually do a lot. There was a talk between, I don't remember. They're all the same. It could be Destiny. They're all the same. And they were talking about like they were saying, well, the problem is that the problem is not the progressives, is that people just like we weren't able to talk to people about progressive values, and the other person was telling, it was Tom Follery and somebody else, and Tom Follery was saying, well, the problem is that I don't think the progressive ideas were like that marketable, and you weren't able to even go ahead and defend them. And the guy replies, what would you have us done? And he was like, well, you probably should have moderate. And he was like, well, if we do that and we become more like the Republicans, what are we even defending? What are we even doing? And I think my thing with this is I am okay, for example, with anybody coming and voting for what I believe, right? I'm not gonna go ahead and say, hey, you are X person, you're not supposed to vote for me. Like, we're gonna go ahead and do all of these cool things for the economy that's gonna be good for you, and we're gonna do all of these cool things about, not being robbed in the street and being prosecuted for that. But maybe we're not gonna allow you to do, to have huge companies of pornography
But
all around.
right,
Right?
I understand what you're saying. I do. But here's the problem, right? The problem is that it's more complicated than it's being made out here. So it's not just one issue, right? There are thousands upon thousands of issues that people could vote on. There are economic issues. You maybe want to end property tax. Maybe you want to end the income tax. Maybe you want more subsidies for certain industries. Maybe you want less subsidies. Maybe you want tariffs, right? Maybe you want to lower interest rates. Maybe you want to end the Fed. All of these are just off the top of my head economic issues. Then you would have a litany of other issues. You could have social issues, whether you should be legalization of each in particular drug, whether you should allow abortions at this point or not, whether you should allow gay marriage. Like, there are thousands upon thousands of issues, and it's already difficult to find a party of people that agree with you on 95 to 98% of the issues, because if you're a free-thinking individual, you'll probably never find someone who totally agrees with you in politics. You're never going to find a political party that totally agrees with you. It's just not going to happen. So the question becomes then, how much of the priorities that you want are you willing to win to sacrifice some of the ones that you also would want? So let me put it this way. Let's say what we really want is a party that would win, that would do 100% of the things that we like. That's what we would all want. It's not going to happen. So then the question is, okay, well, if I could win and only get 80% of the stuff that I wanted, would that be better than saying perpetually losing, but holding out for 100%? I would say yes, getting 80% is better than getting 0%, is what I would say. And so the issue then becomes, and sort of my disagreement with Andrew Wilson, he's absolutely correct. When it comes to issues such as gay marriage, the Republican Party at this point, as it's made up, is not going to revoke gay marriage. That's true. And that pisses off Andrew Wilson. And he says, until we draw a line in the sand, we'll never get gay marriage revoked, because the party will just care less and less about it, and they'll care about all this other shit. Now, I would argue that Andrew Wilson cares about other shit like trans issues with children. He cares about things like financial situations. He cares about things like family values, cares about things like birthrights, cares about things probably foreign policy, etc. He'll get more of that he likes with Trump than he would have with Kamala Harris. And yet his criticism the day before an election is, fuck women, they shouldn't be allowed to vote. Fuck gay people, we don't want them voting for us. We need to kick them all out of the party, all but ensuring a perpetual loss. So my criticism to Andrew Wilson is, if you feel strongly enough that gay marriage is the hill to die on like that, then your job is to convince people culturally so that you can convince more than 50% of the country that gay marriage should be revoked. If you're incapable of doing that, then don't get pissed off that you had to build a coalition party in order to get victories, because there's not enough people that believe what you do in order to win elections. That's the problem. And so I'll ask you, just take that one specific issue. Would you weather that Trump lost because he's not going to revoke gay marriage and we don't want those damn gay people around our party?
No, I agree with you. I will not say that I would prefer. Let's say that there must be certain compromises, especially as how the culture is right now. So I agree in that regard. I don't think it was the best
But yeah,
I don't think it was.
and like just the further like the idea that like revoke the 19th Amendment. I disagree. I think revoking the 19th Amendment is stupid. I think women should have the right to vote. I've debated on that. But the
I
question I
disagree
am,
with you, but yeah.
well, that's why would you bring it up the day before an election? Like
No,
you know it's going to be close. It's just it doesn't matter what you think the rules should be. The rules are there now for this game, for this election right now. So what good is it to alienate 50% of the voting public because you don't think they should have the right to vote? It seems like a really poor timing to do this sort of stuff. And you know,
in
again,
your criticism about timing, I agree. Now, I disagree in the idea when it comes to the like
Why-
we're after the election, so I can have this
right?
discussion
Okay,
now.
we
right?
got 5 minutes. So give me your best case why women shouldn't have the right to vote.
There's two. Okay, I agree mostly with what you have with what Jim Bob said when it comes to it. They cannot enforce it. But besides enforcement, there's also a moral issue when it comes to that, and there's a moral hierarchy of things what we should do. I don't think. I would say I don't believe that most people should vote. I believe in the idea that there should be a service like a service-based vote. You serve the country a certain amount of time, and then you can vote.
Yeah, but that's different than revoking the 19th. So if
Well,
a woman does that service, should she have the right to vote?
yeah, that's pretty much what the consensus has become when it comes to the
That's
Christian
not
nationalism,
true.
yeah.
That's not what Jim Bob thinks or what Andrew Wilson thinks. They don't believe that.
Yeah, if you go ahead and ask him, like if it means you make a certain amount of service, you should vote. They will say yes most of the time. I've had this I've seen this
Well, then
conversation.
that's
a
then
million
that
times.
revoking the 19th is absurd. Then there's no distinction between men or women. My entire argument, if you go back to that debate with Jim Bob, is I don't mind if people want to talk about the ability to vote based on merit. If you say you have to achieve certain things, my problem is telling people based on immutable characteristics such as the sex that they were born that they will never be allowed to have a right to vote. That's what my problem is. So it is erroneous to say that women shouldn't vote. If you want to say military service is necessary to be able to vote, and the majority of people that have military service will be men, however, the minority that are women that have that service should still be allowed to vote. I would have criticisms with that sort of ideology, but not to the level I would have saying that no woman should be able to vote. So
I don't even say military service. I think service.
oh well,
to
yeah,
the
but you get
country
yeah,
and
like it could be
something.
civic service, whatever, right? And people
Yeah.
are correct. This is the Starship Troopers model, right?
Yeah, it's such a. Now the other reason why when we're talking about repeal the 19, the other reason why is due to the fact of how the system it is right now, and I think I made this distinction like men have to go ahead and register to the selective service, and they have to be in the selective service, and they can be drafted. While woman doesn't have to. Now, if you tell me, do you want women to be drafted? The answer is no, and it has to do with moral order as well. I don't want to send women to war. They're not as effective, but it doesn't
Right.
have
So
to
now
be
it gets back to the original.
moral.
It gets back to the original criticism. So if you say you have to achieve some level of service in order to vote, and then you'd say, but there are levels of service that we don't want women in.
If
Therefore,
we're talking about a model of when it's about service brings like service brings citizenship kind of idea. That's the Starship model. But in the model we are right now, that's the criticism I have with the model that
well,
is
that's
right
fine.
now.
It's fine. Do you want to send women to war?
No, I don't, and
Okay.
it has nothing to do. Like I wouldn't want to. Okay, I don't think they have. I don't think they should be voting because they don't have to. But besides that, if you're like, well, if we draft them, it's like no, it goes against the moral order. Like I don't want.
Okay.
I don't.
So
I don't
if you're
think it's
so let's
okay
play out your
for a woman
argument.
to
Let's play
vote.
out your argument, right? So your argument
Uh-huh.
seems to be as follows: that you think that there should be some level of service to be able to vote. You think that that level of service doesn't include military service; it can include other things, and that
Yeah.
women would be able to do that. But you're against women serving in many military fields, and you're upset because selective services means only men have to draft. Well, then that
Well,
would
it's not
imply.
being upset. I just think that it's
Well,
like
okay,
let's not add any kind of
Okay, you don't like the fact that men are registered for
they're
selective
distinct from-
services, but I mean, wow, we're getting pedantic now. Okie
Yeah, I
dokie.
know.
With 3 minutes left to go in the show, we're going to criticize the word upset. Whew.
Well, what
I
I'm
would
saying-
say, I will say this.
what
I
I'm
would say
saying.
people that have sand in their vagina that criticize words like upset shouldn't have the right to vote because you're clearly showing a lack of masculinity. So, okay, I'm not trying to have any rhetorical tricks here when using the word upset. You have a problem or criticism with the fact that men have to register with selective services, and yet women still have the right to vote even though they don't have to register with selective services. Fair enough?
Fair enough.
Okay.
That's at
So the
moment.
point, when you look at this in conjunction, what you can see is it seems like your criticism has more to do with the fact that you wouldn't be a problem with men still having to register with selective services and women still being able to have the right to vote. Because your ideal model would be women should have the right to vote as long as they engage in some sort of civic service. So still, your society at the end of the day would include a society where if there was a draft, it would only be men being drafted, and yet women would still have a say in things because they would have a right to vote because they have the potential to engage in civic service as well. So so then when we look at that, right, the selective service argument, I don't think that the only thing that should derive your right to vote is that you could be drafted into military service. I don't think that should be the case. I think that you should have input in the way a government runs if that government is going to have input on the things that you're allowed to do with your life. So, for example, if you are forced to pay taxes, why should you not have a vote in how the government spends those taxes? You see my point? Did I lose you?
No, I'm still
okay.
here. So, okay. Let me put it this way. What I think your criticism of my system is you're criticizing my ideal system with the system that is right now. So right now there's no service that will allow you to get the vote. Just get the vote.
Right.
And men are still required to go ahead and get into. They're still going to be drafted if there is a war that needs men
But
to be drafted.
that's sort of irrelevant, though. That's sort of irrelevant, right?
Well,
Because
what do you mean that it's irrelevant?
it's irrelevant because your final criticism, your ideal society would say, and still men should be the only one that's get drafted, and yet still women should have the right to vote. So your
Yeah, but
criticism,
men that don't have the right to vote would be drafted too.
once they're drafted, they would have the right to vote.
No, they don't. If
That's
you
absurd.
have a draft,
So then your
you have
system's
a-
really
you have-
stupid.
no. You have a service, and once you're done with your service to the nation, then you have the right to vote. If you are a normal person and you get drafted and you have to go to war because there's a war, that doesn't mean you have done the service.
That's completely. I mean, I don't know. I'm gonna have to let you go. I can't be here all day. That's completely asinine. So you're telling me
I
my
don't think that's
government has?
asinine.
Yeah, it is, because the argument for having to have some service to have a voice would be that once you do something that is of a significant service to your country, that you should now have input. If going and fighting in war for your country doesn't reach that level of service because we told you you had to go as opposed to you voluntarily signed up, your system makes no sense.
Well, we're gonna go ahead and say that men supposedly got the right to vote because they had to do this kind of service. What kind of service is a woman doing right now that would allow them to have
Back
the right to vote?
back to the initial question. So you already said that the military service wouldn't be necessary in your system for people to have the right to vote. You could have certain
Yes,
forms
but
of
we're
civic
talking
service.
about you go ahead and criticize that on my system, but when it comes to the reality, you don't criticize it.
Okay, then I'll turn the question to you. Why should men that aren't in the military have the right to vote?
Why should men that are in the military
Right.
have the right to vote?
Right. Why should it be different for men or women? Regardless, we have people that
It
aren't
shouldn't
engaged.
be different.
Okay, it shouldn't be different. And so then your argument now is you're criticizing the current system and says, my criticism is right now men could get drafted. Therefore, why should women have the right to vote because they can't get drafted? And I'm like, oh, so you're saying military service should be necessary to vote? No, I'm not saying that. And I'm saying if you get drafted, that shouldn't mean you have the right to vote. So the problem is you're criticizing a current system. Yes, I could criticize this current system in 50,000 ways. That's absolutely true. I could. But when you say, well, where do your criticisms derive from? What exactly are you criticizing? And I would say, I'm criticizing this because this is the way it should be. And when I ask you what the way it should be, you're like, well, actually, I have no problem with that. I have no problem with the fact that it should be only men that could get drafted. And I actually think that if you get drafted, you still shouldn't have the right to vote. So the entire idea, your criticism of selective services and the ability to get drafted has nothing to do with voting. So on one hand, you want to imply oh, selective services, because the way it's set up shows that women shouldn't have the right to vote because they can't be chosen for selective services. But on the other hand, you're like, even in my ideal system, if you get drafted, which it should be only men, you still shouldn't have the right to vote. So the things are disconnected. It would be like...
They are disconnected, yes.
They are, right. So then again, so to go back
Because
to
it's
it,
not
so then to go back
in
to your
my
criticism,
system.
your criticism isn't women shouldn't have the right to vote or that it has anything to do with selective services. You're fine that only men get chosen for selective services. So you have no problem with the selective service thing at all. None. It's running the way you would want. Only men could get drafted. It should have nothing to do with whether or not you could vote or not.
No, it has to do with...
You just said no.
Yeah,
you
it
just
had
said...
nothing to... In my ideal system, it had nothing to do with if you have the right to vote.
Okay,
or not.
so
The
in
right
your
to vote is
ideal,
granted
okay,
through
so real
service.
quick, so in
the-
your ideal
the
system,
norm-
it has nothing to do with whether or not you should have the right to vote. In the current system, it has nothing to do with whether or not you should have the right to vote. So what's the problem?
the current system, it does have to do. It's supposed to.
No, it doesn't.
The vote was given to men because.
Can women vote
of-
right now?
Yes.
Are they eligible for selective services?
No, they're not.
Then it would seem that in the current system, whether or not
In the
you have to
current
sign up for
system, they
selective
went on
services,
ahead and
it would seem.
disregarded
It
the
would seem.
reason
I'll
why
finish
men
my
should
point.
have the
It
right
would
to
seem.
vote.
It would seem that the current system has nothing to do with whether or not you're registered for selective services if you have the right to vote. That's what it would seem. So it would seem you're incorrect about that.
In the current system, they disregarded the reason why is it that men have the right to vote, and they just
No, that's
they
not
just
true.
decided-
Your
they just
implications of
decided to
okay, what
give-
is the current? Then explain to me. Point to me the law or anywhere in the Constitution or wherever that you're saying the current system is supposed to be that only people eligible for selective services could vote. Right? That's what it's supposed to be, but it's not that. But you don't want it to be that. So can you point to me the law that says that that's supposed to be the current system?
Okay, how about we do this? Because you're about to leave anyway. I call in next week. I got all the information.
That sounds
and we
great.
talk later.
Once more, we'll deal with you dumb fucking morons that want to repeal the 19th. I'm more than happy to do it again and again.
Yeah, sounds
What
good.
a world of perpetual fucking stupidity that I have to deal with, dealing with you fucking idiots over and over again. But it'll be fun. I appreciate you calling in. So,
All right, have a good one, Rob.
all right, take it easy, Emmett. Oh my God, a fate. This is what my channel has become. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. This is going to be my new January 6th, isn't it? Talking with right-wingers everywhere. Actually, women shouldn't have the right to vote. Well, actually, they should. But it's because of selective services. But actually, in my system, even if you're drafted, you shouldn't have the right to vote. Holy fuck. You people have no eye for strategy. It's just, what a bunch of fucking dolts. Unbelievable. And yes, that goes to Andrew Wilson as well and Jim Bob Nobben. I love them, but my God. Never ending. Never ending. And it doesn't even make... How the fuck could you say, I think service should be necessary to vote? Okay, that's a different argument. That's based on meritocracy. Go back and watch the debate I did with Jim Bob. I actually feel that there should be some meritocracy to how to vote. My threshold for effort that you have to achieve to be able to vote is show up on election day. You have to be a U.S. citizen. You have to show up on election day, same day voting, with a few exceptions if you have an ailment or something and you need an absentee ballot. Other than that, if you're too lazy to show up on election day, tough shit. If you don't have an ID, tough shit. If you're too lazy to get one, that's it. But that's a form of a meritocratic limit to who could vote. It's a very low bar. But if you want to say, my threshold's higher, I think you need to have some sort of service, that's a more reasonable argument than women shouldn't be able to vote. But if your argument's going to be so nonsensical that says, well, military service, if you get drafted, still means that you shouldn't have a right to vote. Holy shit. What? Imagine that. Imagine being taken from your family, forced to go to the front lines, fight a brutal war for a year and come back and says, now you haven't served this country enough to have a voice yet in how it goes. But that guy that volunteered for the military, who didn't get sent over, he did serve. He served, so he could vote. But not you, who lost a limb or some shit over in war. What the fuck are you talking about? Real quick, read the chat here. Did I miss any super chats? I want to get those before we leave. Just Another new account for $5 says, not to absolve Biden of guilt, but the generals that lied to him about Afghanistan blamed him after the evac. Yeah, loyalty needs to be a qualification. Totally agree. Garrett Link for $10 says, one important thing about the people ignoring about RFK is that he wants to implement much needed reforms on CPS. Another new account for $5 says, TLD, too long don't read. No evidence Gaetz did anything. I'm currently arguing with lefties about this. The same people who are saying you voted for Trump, you're pro-SA. Right. John Kell for $5 says, most women wouldn't volunteer to serve public or military services for free in order to gain voting rights, is Andrew's argument. That could be true. That's fine. That's a different argument. John Kell, $5 says, 16-year-olds are taxed. Do they have the right to vote? They should. We could have arbitrary limits, but I think that if you are taxed, you should have some sort of voice. That's something that I would believe. Again, go back and watch my debate with Jim Bob. I don't know how I can make this more clear. There are two separate debates saying, on whole, women, because of how you were born, should not be able to vote is a horseshit, terrible argument. It's indefensible. You should not be restricted to how you can vote by immutable characteristics. That's no different than saying black people shouldn't be able to vote. Same argument. People under 5'8" shouldn't be able to vote. Same argument. You should not be punished because of physical characteristics you have no control over that says that you're not allowed to have a right to vote. Now, there is a threshold argument as to what we should put as a limitation as to who has a voice in voting. One of those is age limits. I'm open to discussions. One of them is paying taxes. I've heard people say you shouldn't have the right to vote if you don't have children. There are people that suggested you shouldn't have the right to vote if you don't own land. I've heard people suggest you shouldn't have the right to vote unless you serve in the military. I've heard people say you shouldn't have the right to vote unless you do military or some form of civic service. All of these arguments are far more reasonable than you shouldn't be allowed to vote because you're black. You shouldn't be allowed to vote because you're a woman. You shouldn't be allowed to vote because you're under 5'8". They're far more reasonable arguments. I explained this directly to Jim Bob over and over and over and over and over and over and over again in my debate with him. My problem is that you seem to be suggesting, based on an immutable characteristic, that people shouldn't be able to vote. If your argument is there is some sort of meritocracy threshold that we should be able to achieve before we can have the right to vote, I'm open to hearing it, and I wouldn't necessarily be disapproving of what that would be. It would be interesting to hear that. Oftentimes, though, there are going to be things that I disagree with in the specific details of it, but it's a far more tenable argument. This is very similar to arguments I make against affirmative action. If you want to have a policy that says the 100 poorest farmers in this country are going to get $10,000 in government assistance, fine. I might agree or disagree with that policy, but there's nothing particularly odious about it. But if you say the 100 poorest black farmers will get this money, no, you should not be having law or divvying out money based on an immutable characteristic like skin color. Now, if you say, but Rob, the first way that you suggested it, actually 95% of that money would have went to black people anyways, because it turns out 95 out of the top 100 poorest farmers are black. Fine, that's okay. If you write a policy that is not racist, that is not based on immutable characteristics, and it overwhelmingly affects one immutable characteristic group over another, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, because you're not discriminating based on immutable characteristics. That's been the argument I've made affirmative action since I've had a channel. It's the same argument I would make about voting. That's fine. If you want to say this level of service is required to be able to vote, and women are eligible to do that level of service if they choose, we just think that 90% of women won't do it. That's fine. That argument is in nowhere near as bad as women shouldn't have the right to vote. Completely fine. But I asked my wife this the other day. Imagine that they came to you and said, listen, you no longer have to pay income tax, you no longer have to pay sales tax, but you can't vote. Would you take that deal? Like you right now as a person. They come to you and they say, listen, all the sales tax you pay when you go to the counter, all of your income tax, all your property taxes, you don't have to pay taxes ever again anymore in this country, but you can't vote. Would you take that deal? It's an interesting proposition. I think an awful lot of people would say, shit, yeah. What do I give a shit? The system sucks anyways. We just elect a bunch of people that don't give a shit about me. So you're looking to save me $6,000, $7,000 a year? Fuck yeah. Yeah, Ralston, I tend to agree more with that as well. I think 18's a fine limit. Granted, it's some arbitrary. I know some 16-year-olds that I would trust to be more informed to vote than some 40-year-olds that I know. But in general, I have no problem with the age cutoff of 18. But I do question whether or not they should have to pay income taxes. Sales taxes would be difficult. But if you come to that conclusion, yeah, I would give away my right to vote to not pay taxes anymore. Well, then ask a question like Emmett. I know I'm going a little hard on Emmett. I don't dislike Emmett. I don't dislike Jim Bob or Andrew Wilson or anyone else in the chat that wants to repeal the 19th. I don't. I think it's a dumb argument, but whatever. I'm just being a little hyperbolic. But nonetheless, if you're like, maybe I would take that deal if I don't have to pay taxes, I would give away my right to vote. Well, now look at it from their perspective. Okay, well, if it requires service, how many people would say, nah, it's not worth it? I don't want to have to spend, let's just say it's a number. You have to have 1,000 hours of service, military service or civic service, like working on roads or bridges or shit like that. There's probably a lot of people that say, nah, I don't give a shit enough about voting to do that. And would that lead to the people that are willing to do that? Does that signify that they have a love for their country, a love for the people of the country and the land of the country? And so those are the people that would have a more vested interest in voting? Maybe. If you're willing to keep paying taxes because you want to have a vote, would that signify that you have more of a love for the country and more of a concern of its outcome? So you're willing to put in that extra work and effort? Maybe. It's an interesting argument, and it's a far better argument than women shouldn't have the right to vote. Yeah, okay, Sparky, it'd probably have to be more than 6 months, but you get what I'm saying. So I don't think that argument's necessarily a bad argument. It's worth having the discussion. I've heard people talk about custodial voting. Should your children get a vote? And then you as the parent gets to decide what their vote is. So I have a 3-year-old. I have more skin in the game because I have a kid. So should I get an extra vote? Now there'd be problems. How would we decide between my wife and I if we disagree who gets his vote? You see the problem, but I just find the women shouldn't vote arguments just stupid to me. It's a more interesting argument to say you have to have some level of service. But even then, you got to be careful because raise the age to 21. I mean, interesting argument as well. I mean, I would think that if you're eligible to go fight in a war for the United States, that you're of age to do that, you should probably be eligible to vote. So, anyways, fun discussion. Emmett, no hard feelings. God, I get so tired of arguing the 19th Amendment shit, though. It's just... yeah, Adam friended. That's right, folks. I've heard Adam talk about that. It's... but it's just... I mean, again, it's... You have to understand it. And, like, this is the last thing I'll say on this. I think that the current system is set up as totally corrupt. I talk about it all the time. For me, it's so corrupt that we get all these different groups. You have paleocons, you have Christian nationalists, you have libertarians, you have progressive lefties like RFK, or like Jimmy Dore, or an Aaron Maté. You have establishment Republicans. You have populists like me. We're like all right here. And the system's so corrupt that we all need to head in the same direction. But eventually what happens is we're going to splinter off. Oh, I got to go find Hanky's. It's going to happen. So me and Andrew Wilson might agree with like 90% of the direction we want the country to go. But eventually we're going to splinter off. So I say that coalition building right now is important because we are here and we need to get way over here before we can start having disagreements. But in order to get over here, it's going to take all of us working together. So the idea that it's like, nope, women, you're out. You're out. Now, gay people, gone. See ya. Then we're never going to get over there. So, all right, I'm heading out. I will see you all. I'm going to put more shorts up today. Probably be putting them up throughout the weekend. I'll try to stream Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. I can't promise, though. I'll be at work, so when I'm off the clock, I might be able to stream, but you never know. You will see me next Wednesday. I appreciate all of you, even if I'm yelling at you. Gaetz wasn't married and thought she was 19 per Greenberg. Okay. Yeah. If he thought she was 19, that's far less. So, all right. Thank you all so much. I'm going to head out. Watch the Mike Tyson fight tonight. I hope it's fun. You guys take it easy. As always, have a good one.